past, but every little now and then it creeps on back to shade my smile.
morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be, for all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to a brand new Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this August 19th, 2025. Tonight, it is open lines, open topics for this second summer special. And I hope you have all your questions ready, because we're going to be taking them directly from you. You can call into the show. We'll give you that number a little bit later if you want, but you can also ask your questions in the various chat rooms where we are streaming this show across the internet. It's going to be a good one. This is always a favorite. Don't go anywhere. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Vestiges After Dark. Again, I am your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, and I am here with my co-host, Jamie Wolfe. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
Hey, everybody. Made it back safe from New Orleans.
Yeah, we were out there, out there in the haunted country.
Yeah. I bring holy water just, because it's New Orleans, and ended up using it.
Yeah,
So,
I'm telling you.
It was a quick 3 days, but it was definitely interesting.
It's a crazy time out there. It's like we were talking about before the show started. It's not quite the same place it used to be before Katrina.
No, definitely not.
But you can still have fun there if you know where to look.
Yeah, you make friends with the locals, hang out where they hang out, eat where they eat, and you'll be guaranteed to have a good time.
Yeah, you have a good time. Exactly.
Support the local economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we are, again, having our second summer special here, and we are hoping that that tonight's show will be a good one. Unfortunately, it seems like every single time there is a Vestiges After Dark, there is always going to be some kind of technical issue. It's almost to the point where, who's going to even believe us anymore? Because how could you have these many problems? Well, just before we were getting ready to go live here, we were having a power outage because there's a storm in the area, and it reset some things. Are people having trouble hearing us? What's going on? I'm seeing a lot of issues in the chat. I'm just making sure.
I think it was just Tiffany had some issues with.
Just Tiffany. Everyone else can hear me fine.
Mm-hmm.
Could you hear me through the intro and everything else? Let me know in the chat if you did, because I'm just making sure that everything's good on Father Chris's end. Okay. No issues on April. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, it's probably a local issue, Tiffany, with your connection. She probably can't hear me anyway, but the reset should help. And Tracy's listening upstairs, so everything's good. Okay, I just want to make sure, and you could all hear me through the intro, because I know that last summer special, the one we did last month, you couldn't hear me through the intro on the live YouTube feed, the video feed, but you could on the audio-only feed that went out to the podcast. So it was very strange. I want to make sure we had that one worked out. But you could hear me through the intro. Okay,
something else.
It is. It doesn't need to be this difficult.
No,
but with
the
constant updates and, nobody that you can really talk to, because nobody wants to actually offer, real tech support, because nobody wants to pay anybody to work. it just becomes a challenge to be able to run a show like this. But let me know if there were any issues with the intro. Hopefully there wasn't. But I'll tell you, I'm distracted by the new video. Yeah,
I mean, it was a cool intro.
Yeah, I think it was a day's worth of work, and with the help of AI, I was able to get it done in that time, because otherwise it probably would have taken me months.
Agreed.
It was a lot of work. I'm not going to say it wasn't, but it definitely, AI took about 40% of the job out of the equation, so that's good. Anyway, we are on a brand new connection tonight. Okay, so last time when we did our first summer special on the fiber internet, we were still having some kind of outage issues. So we upped the bandwidth to double. We're now on a 2.2 gigabyte connection up and down. It's as fast as you can get. In fact, it's faster than anybody really can use. Most modems, most gateways don't even have the option to run at that speed. But it's not so much about the speed, because there's only so much that you can get with services like YouTube and everything else. Facebook has restrictions too. So it's not so much about the speed as it is about the bandwidth that speed gives you. So by doubling it, it means that you can have twice as many devices all running at the same time, which lowers the chance of there being interruptions with the connection. So we should not have any issues anymore with that going forward. Now, power going out, I can't promise anything. With a storm in the area and the power company already, we had some brownouts. Fortunately, I didn't lose all my settings. The laptop has its own battery power, but the internet runs completely on power. And even though there's a generator to this location, that will still, the power has to go up before the generator kicks in. And that means that we'll lose internet. And if that were to happen, well, the show's over. So enjoy us while we're here. But hopefully we're stable now.
Fingers and toes crossed.
I'm telling you,
I think it's about done for the night.
I think so. And the storm seems to be subsiding. Yeah. And usually you lose power twice when it goes out. So I think we'll be okay. But I just wanted to give fair warning in case it happens. You won't be surprised, because there is something going on. Joining us from Australia, we have Father Chris Yates. How you doing tonight, Father? This morning for you.
Good
this morning for
morning.
you.
I'm doing well. I mean, it's great because it's night where you are. I can say it was my birthday yesterday, even though here it was 2 days ago.
Well, happy birthday!
Yeah, happy birthday! Yeah,
thank you very much. So
hope you had a good one. Hope you drank a good scotch.
Yeah, I did. In fact, I was bought a very nice scotch by my father-in-law. In fact, I'll put a photo and stuff on the app as well.
Check it out.
Please do.
But also, I mean, it was a birthday sort of weekend that you would have appreciated, because we started by going to Rick Stein's restaurant on Friday night in Port Stevens.
Okay.
So he's been a bit of a TV hero of mine for a long time.
Nice.
And so. Yeah, it's the third time we've been to his restaurant. He opened up 2 restaurants in Australia, and they're great because it's really high quality.
Oh, we're losing you, Father. Hope that's not me.
Feel like you don't have to worry about what you do with the napkin or who you take with you. So,
right.
So it's really good, and actually not expensive. Like, bizarrely, it's cheaper than some really rubbish restaurants. So
wow.
Yeah, there you go. So can recommend, if anyone's in Australia, Rick Stein's restaurants. He's got 2 in New South Wales. The one I've been to is Port Stevens. Very worth going to.
I need to get down there sometime.
And when you come over, we'll go there.
Yeah, I need to get down there sometime.
Just come on over.
Yeah, it's only halfway
when you come
around
over,
the world.
there is a room here.
Yeah, halfway around the world, 12 hours into the future.
Australia has been on my bucket list since junior high. So
United have got some great deals on at the moment.
Okay, all right.
From LAX to from anywhere in America to Sydney. So
I'm going to the UK, Spain, and France next year, and then
okay.
I think Levi wants to do Japan the following year. So maybe I can fit it in between Spain and Japan. How about that?
Yeah.
Somewhere in between.
I'll figure it out.
Japan.
Yeah, yeah.
Similar time zone. I think it's 1 hour difference.
See, there we go. Maybe we could just do it like a 2-week. Go to Japan and then head down and see you
hop on over.
Yeah, just hop on over.
Yeah, I'll be in Britain for Christmas. I'll be there from the 6th of December. So
well, that's good, because you need to have a proper Christmas. You can't have a Christmas in the summer. I'm sorry, that just does not work.
It's so bizarre.
It does not
It'll be
work.
the first one for my wife, though, who's Australian. It'll be the first time she's been well, the first time she'll actually experience Christmas as it's supposed to be,
okay.
cold and damp.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, that is what you have to. I mean, the whole point of Christmas, right? The whole point of the Yule season was to shine a light in the darkness of the coldest, dark, wet time of year. So
That's it.
It works
Absolutely.
out. It works out. But anyway, I would love to see you. So we'll work that out sometime. And of course, if you come here, there's a guest house for you now. You can have the whole place to yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll be doing that.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. It'll be a lot more comfortable than last time with that horrible, questionable motel you stayed at. We don't want that to happen again.
I had to use my cassock as the curtains.
I'm telling you, I think it was your grace that saved your life by staying over there.
We've said it before, but when I pulled up to the hotel, I almost kept on going. I was like, no, you're not staying here.
Yeah, that's a rough.
I don't care if you were a copper, you're not staying here.
I'm telling you, anything off the interstate.
Pull and drive, and you smell weed coming from the. I'm like, oh dear God.
I'm going to apply for the firearms permit ahead of time next time.
You need a visitor's permit or something like that. We need to find a way to do it. Joining us also from Tennessee, we have Brandon Milan with us. How you doing tonight, Brandon?
Brandon.
I'm pretty good. Father Chris, whenever you do come to visit, like the house is very nice. You only have like one neighbor, and they're pretty chill for the most part. So you'd be a whole lot better than that hotel.
That's right. Brandon has stayed. Brandon has stayed at the retreat house with April, who is in
now.
April and Rachel are both in the chat right now. They both have stayed at the retreat house. Brandon's been there twice. April's been there twice. So he can give you a full rundown as to what it's like. It's a very nice.
In fairness, it's not a high compliment because I would have been better off sleeping in the trees.
You would have had a safer time in the trees. I mean, honestly, I would go up against the wild animals versus the people around here any day of the week.
You might have a rebel deer or something, but
an occasional coyote, but I don't think they're going to bother you as much as the people.
Wild turkey.
Wild turkey. Lots of wild turkeys everywhere. Yeah, and not the whiskey.
No,
the real
these are the gobblers.
Oh my goodness! But come on out, and we'll have to do one of those little live specials again or something like that. It'll
Absolutely.
be fun. All right.
Do that.
So again, this is the summer special, everyone. It is open lines, open topics. So you guys are the guest. Anything you want to talk about? Anyone listening right now? You have a question, a comment, a topic that you have on your mind? You can start asking them in the chat. We'll have the phone number up on screen when we start taking calls. And of course, we prefer you call in, but if you don't want to call in, that's fine. You can ask in the chat. There's lots of various options for you to ask your questions all across the internet. So there's lots of ways in which you can get your questions logged, and we'll do our best to answer all of them tonight. Typically, we're able to. There's not so many coming in that we usually have any of that left over. So Brandon and Father Chris and our moderators, our wonderful moderators, Moosh, Mystics out there today. We've got Tracy upstairs, and she's watching the chat. And
Paula's
Jamie
in there
as well.
too.
Paula. Okay,
Yep.
Paula. So we got a lot of people that can help with questions. Okay,
covered.
they can help with questions, and we'll try not to miss anything. And if my chair is a little squeaky tonight, I need some WD-40. And I have,
That's right. If I'm fidgety, it's because
not your back.
Yeah, it's not my back, but it's not my back. But you might hear a little bit of a squeaking, and I did not.
If it's not him, it might be me because my hips are pretty sore from walking all over New Orleans with a bum leg.
I just
So I'll be
noticed.
And you're
fidgety.
pretty much a bionic woman anyway,
Oh
right?
yeah. Well, the metal parts are definitely reminding
You are
me.
kind of bionic, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I noticed after we went live that it was. And it's like I need to get some WD-40 on it, but maybe Levi during the break can bring some down. If you hear me, Levi, bring some down at the break. I'll try to sit still until then. Okay, let's get started with questions from the ether. What do you have for us tonight, Brandon?
So the first question, if a person believes that they die and go to heaven, and since our reality is what we create, wouldn't that be the case? Like, I understand you saying that we have to let go of everything, but if we create our own reality because we have the creative energy in us, wouldn't our belief that we go straight to heaven also be part of that? Just like we can manifest demons wouldn't we manifest our own afterlife?
Okay, so
That
that
sounds like wishful thinking.
I mean, well, there is some general metaphysical truth here, and we're going to try to break that down because this is actually some of the fundamental problems with mediumship and after or near-death experience, and even astral projection and some of these things. Now, as far as you're talking the Christian theological point of view, if we're talking about the kingdom of heaven that Jesus is talking about, then no, we do not manifest that, and it does not become what we want it to become. We become part of what it is, and that is what salvation is. But I will venture to say that, and this is something that Christianity does not really deal with, but Buddhism deals with perfectly, and quite extensively. Sort of the issue in between. Okay. The problem I've always had with Christianity is that in its effort to give you the most perfect formula for salvation, it leaves out all the nitty-gritty details as to what happens in between your life here and attaining to the kingdom of heaven. It makes it seem as though, once you have salvation, you just, you wake up and you're in heaven and, everything's perfect for all eternity after that. There is a process there. Now, granted, if you die in a state of grace, it is kind of that simple. But for the most part, the average person, particularly today, where we are rejecting a lot of the things where grace comes from by saying that church is not important and, belief in God's not important, all these things, that now it's a more perilous journey for the average person than it might have been in times past. People don't take things like sin seriously anymore, so that complicates the issue and everything else. Doesn't mean that a person's now, completely out of luck. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm going to say the challenges of it are greater. Therefore, you'll hear me talk often about dying well. Okay. Now let's talk about specifically this, because what April, this is April's question, I believe, what she's really referring to here, manifesting our own afterlife, is actually true, but it's a very perilous thing that we should not be striving for, and it should not be something that we would ever want to try to produce. Now, Buddhists, being what they are and having done their extensive rituals of death practice and everything else, have a much better metaphysical framework for this in-between space between what we call life and what the ultimate result is in death for, I guess, the best case scenario. Now in Buddhism, that's referred to as nirvana, particularly parinirvana, which is sort of the nirvana that you don't come back from. And in between that is this thing called the bardo. Now the bardo is a perilous underworld kind of journey. But the thing is that the bardo leads to one of the 6 gati. Okay, this is what they're referred to. There's 6 states of reality that one can be born into as the result of, in Buddhist terms, their karma. And that is determined not so much by the framework of one's way of life as much as it is as to what they must ultimately deal with in terms of how much effort they've put into realizing the illusion in which they live, which is basically ego reality. And we in the Christian religion call that the fallen world, the fallen nature. In Buddhism, they don't talk about it in those terms. They use more of the terms of ignorance and attachment. Ultimately, when you really break them down, it means the same thing. And we can talk a lot about that tonight if you want to. But to make it clear, there's 2 heaven gati, that's the heaven realm and the demigod realm. And then there's 2 physically dense realms, which is the human realm and the animal realm. That's the ones we're most familiar with, of course, because that's the ones we experience as what we call living people. And then there's 2 hell realms, the hungry ghosts and the hell realm. Okay. And all of them, let me repeat myself, all 6 of them are manifestations of your mind.
Well, my manifestation sucked.
Yeah, I know. I know. We talked about that.
Yep.
We've talked about that. And maybe we'll get into a little bit of that again tonight from this perspective. Because even though we've discussed it, we haven't really talked about it from this perspective. Now, what does Buddhism teach? What is it actually trying to teach us, particularly the Tibetan Vajrayana variety? Okay, it is trying to give us the means to see past the illusion so that we don't become attached to the illusion. And you might say, well, why would someone become attached to hell? You'd be surprised. So you can die in a state of being so attached to your traumas, to your miseries, to your sins even, that you can't even identify outside of those things to the point that they become your reality.
People do that in walking life.
Of course, because that's where it begins.
So naturally, they're not going to be able to rise above that.
The gati are not like other dimensions. The gati are things that you cultivate here and now. You're just experiencing the dense side of it because that's what the human animal realm is. But as far as the heaven or the hell realms, you already start experiencing and manifesting that. You just don't become fully a part of it until physical death occurs, and then you enter into a less dense state where then you will see whichever side is. The other side of the coin is being, so attached to bliss and expectation that becomes your reality. So I fully expect that you'll have a whole bunch of people, we've had them on this show, come and say, they died and they saw Jesus opening their arms and being like, come on home. And it's like, yeah, you know what? Buddhism has an axiom for that. If you see Buddha walking along the road, kill him. And why would they say that? Why would they say that about their most sacred figure? Okay, because Jesus to Christians is kind of like Buddha to Buddhists, all right? It pretty much is almost like revered in the same way. So why would, Christians would never say, if you see Jesus walking along the road, kill him. Why would Buddha say that about Buddha? Well, because...
But we did, by the way.
Well, we did. Yeah, we did. And we still do. But we wouldn't want to talk about it. We don't like to think that we would do that. We just kind of, again, with our proclivity to create illusions for ourselves, we attach to the realities that are convenient. And that's why we live in a false reality. It's not to say, and Buddhism doesn't say this either, that the reality around us is like a virtual world or some kind of like virtual reality. It's not saying that. It's saying your perceptions of it. You don't see reality the way it's supposed to be seen. You see it through the lens of what you want to see. And we do that all the time, whether you're Christian or Buddhist.
Well, as St. Paul's put it, we view through a glass darkly.
Yes, that's a great way of putting it. Yes.
But I think like Christianity, because I believe Jesus Christ is true God and true man and rose from the dead and conquered sin and death.
Yes.
Christianity brings a sword. It's both good. It's the best news and it's also bad news, because the best news is for those who have come to the realization that Jesus is Lord, that He is co-eternal with the Father. All of our crappy attachments and useless thinking is actually pierced by the relationship with Him. He does the work with us and for us.
Yes.
And so that's the good news about being. Now that doesn't mean you should be a lazy Christian, and because a lot of what you said absolutely chimes. I mean, I could spend the rest of the whole show talking about people's attachment to their wounds. Right. Because Jesus is really fierce about that. He heals a lot of people, but a lot of the time He says, "What do you want me to do for you?" And that question is really, do you want to be healed?
Yeah.
Or is this injury become so much part of you that it's become you? Because that's sin. Because that's an attachment to injury.
Yeah.
And really, like when it comes to dealing with other people, that maybe it's not about a physical wound but an emotional wound. There's no difference between holding on to that and refusing that line of the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. I mean, that really is the essence of that attachment. So the good news for Christians is Jesus will do that work for you because you have faith in Him. Here's the bad news for you. And this is where it is different for a Buddhist who's not encountered the gospel. For those who have encountered the gospel of Jesus Christ, received the Holy Spirit, for them to then rely not on Christ, but on some kind of philosophical, metaphysical pathway is in fact a rejection of that which has been given to them, and that rejection is terminal. So it's not. So in other words, it's not the same for a Hindu, a Buddhist who's grown up in a part of the world where the gospel hasn't been received. I'm talking about reception, not talking about you can read it online. I'm talking about people who've actually been baptized, given their life to Christ. That rejection is terminal.
Oh yeah, rejection. I mean, I think the challenge to that is that if you're raised in a Buddhist culture, and I think I'm getting a little off topic on this, but I'm just going to kind of to respond to you and then get back to the rest of April's question. If you're born in a Buddhist culture and you're raised in with a Buddhist understanding and you're content with that, and then somebody, through the course of your life, because let's face it, unless you live in some kind of primitive jungle somewhere, how are you going to be able to say that you were not exposed to the gospel? It's too available. But whether or not you want to,
it has to be received as well.
It has to be received. Exactly. That's the caveat.
Yeah, willingly received.
And if you're content with what you have, like the Dalai Lama has been asked that very question. He's very versed or at least somewhat versed in Christianity. And he says, it's a beautiful religion. It's not for me. I'm content with what I know. But
we believe it's the truth, and so he's not content with the truth, right?
Well, from our perspective,
I'm not saying he's condemned, by the way, because he's not rejected Christ because he's not accepted him. So that's the distinction I'm drawing.
That is the distinction. But I think it's true for both of us though, because it's like you could be a child that was raised in a Christian family and accepted baptism, went to first communion, did all this stuff, and then grew up and was like, this is a bunch of bullshit. I'm not getting.
They're in a worse place.
They're much worse place. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it works both ways. It's not so much that whether or not if once you've accepted it, then responsibility comes to maintain it.
Yeah.
If you lose it after accepting, that's where it becomes very treacherous. But to get back to the question, the fact is that there is a realm. Now, of course, in Judeo-Christian theology, it falls under the domain of what the Jews used to refer to as Sheol. Okay, kind of like this state of unconsciousness, of almost like a drifting dreamlike state. In Buddhism, it's much more dynamic than how it's described in Judaism, because basically Sheol and the Bardo are essentially the same thing when you really break it down. I know there'll be people that argue with me about that, but I would argue right back. And I don't want to get into that debate because that's not really important to this question. The question is, do we create our own heaven? Well, yeah, if you haven't found the real one, is the answer. If you haven't found the real one. And how do you know the difference between what you want to be true and what is true? And that is directly proportionate for both Buddhists and Christians, they both agree on this, to how much have you surrendered yourself to how much have you surrendered your attachments? Because
I'm reminded of that quote from John Milton. I think it's from Paradise Lost. The mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven.
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about?
I think it is, but I think it can be even more real than just sort of like a philosophical thought. I think it can become a reality. For example, there are a lot of people who define their life by their illnesses. In fact, they will even say, I am so-and-so, I've got this problem. And when you live your life as though you are your illness, then what else are you then? You're attached to the illness so pervasely.
You hamstring yourself.
That you become the illness.
Victim culture is evil. Victim culture is really evil. And it's destroying people.
And that's the beautiful thing, is that Buddhism actually recognized that, 500 years before there even was a Christianity, and had been doing something about it. Now, the difference between Christianity and Buddhism is basically that with Christianity, you get infinite help. With Buddhism, it's all on your shoulders mostly. And that doesn't necessarily bode well. And even a Buddhist will tell you that won't bode well unless you perhaps spend 500 or 5,000 lifetimes working at it. Whereas, a Christian who surrenders themselves to God will never have to worry about it. But the key here is surrender. If you don't, then then whatever that you've heard the thing, spend your money now because you can't take it with you. That's true for money, but it's not true for your state of mind. If greed is the motivation behind why you might hoard or be a miser with resources, then yeah, you don't take the money with you, but you definitely take the mentality with you. You become miserliness. You become greed. And that becomes your entire reality. Now, that's a hell realm. From a Buddhist perspective, that's a hell. You will live in a perpetual state, which will feel like an eternity. It's not actually in Buddhism. It's not forever. It's almost forever. It's the three immeasurable eons thing. But you will become where you live in a constant state of greed that can never be satiated. The fear, because what causes greed? It's fear.
Fear of losing.
Fear of loss. So what you will experience in this is a practically eternal state of feeling as though you're always losing everything and trying so hard to hold it all together and not being able to. Would you want to spend eternity like that? That's precisely what people will create in their afterlife if they haven't worked towards salvation. So in a lot of ways, this is very consistent with kind of a Dante's Inferno sort of perspective on hell. There is some truth to that. The difference is it can end when you want it to. And the problem is that, as they say in Buddhism, why would the hell realms or the heaven realms end when a person who is in the hell realms, for example, are so burdened by the pain and suffering that they can't see the forest from the trees. They can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, so they stay perpetually in it. And the person likewise who's in a heaven realm, when they're so blissed out by the delusions of their expectations for what they think Jesus is or what God is, if they live and worship an idol their whole life, they become that idol, and that idol welcomes them. And there'll be a false Christ there to greet them. And they won't be able to tell the difference between the real one and this fake one they've created, which is just an appearance, a manifestation of their own ego. And therefore, you're so blissed out. Why would you care? You don't care if you found the real one or not. It feels good. And we as Christians are actually called to reject both, to find the real, authentic Christ, the real, authentic kingdom of heaven. And with grace, that's easily attainable. Without grace,
and if it comes without sacrifice or a cross for you as well,
yes,
it's not authentic.
Exactly.
It can't be.
Exactly. It does. It has to hurt. And even again, Buddhism doesn't have a crucifixion framework, but they definitely have a sacrificial framework. They understand that it is the death of the ego, and it's the hardest thing to achieve. But until you've done so, then guess what? You're stuck, and we hold those attachments with us. Death does not change it. So if you live your whole life attached to your people, your suffering, your fears, your anxieties, your sicknesses, and if you made a whole lifestyle of that, and you haven't come to terms with that by the time you die, either by handing it all over to God for his grace to replace it, or by virtue of doing all the work that Buddhists have to do, then you're going to basically become those very things in death. And that, let me tell you, is not a pleasant experience, which is why, for those of us who work in the paranormal field, know that the most challenging things that we go up against are not demons and fallen angels, but the soul, the spirits of people who did not die well. And they held on to their attachments so tightly that now they have no identity beyond it. They have no reality. See, we ultimately, in Buddhism, it's called anatta. It means no soul, but the word soul is defined differently in Buddhism than it is in Christianity. It doesn't mean that you don't have a life force or essence like we define soul in that sense. In Buddhism, soul is defined as self. Okay? And in reality, Christian or Buddhist is the same. There is no self. The only identity that is to be found is in Christ. Then that's what is meant in Philippians 2:5, let this mind be in you that is also in Christ Jesus. We must take on, Christ becomes our identity, not our sicknesses, not our fears, not our traumas, Christ, okay? And
it's
then,
also why we know it has to be true. Because because if you think about it, you're right. We make idols of our own disease, right? That's where disease comes from, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's psychological or physical or both, and the way that God snaps us out of it is by saying, "Look at me, I'm one of you, and I'm on a cross."
yes.
You know, like so whatever your sufferings are, I'm abandoned, I'm wounded, I'm beaten. And it's not about like, I've suffered more than you. That's not the point. And the reason we know that is because that beaten, suffering, crucified man extends his wounds to the disciples and says, "Peace be with you." And that is the miracle. That's the radical truth. Is that instead of licking his wounds and saying, "Where were you, you bastards?" Sorry, I'll probably get you banned from YouTube now. He says, "Peace be with you," and that's how you know it's authentic.
Yeah.
And it's how we know God's love for us is beyond measure, because I wouldn't do that. I'm not. I'm not God.
No. By death
I
he
think
conquers.
I'd be a bit vengeful.
Yeah. By death he conquers death is an old, Orthodox hymn.
Easter anthem.
It is. It's an anthem. Yeah. By death he conquers death. What that means is, in order to defeat the disease, you have to face it and be completely detached from it entirely. And the only way for us to truly do that reliably is to completely give it over to him. That's where Christ comes in. That's why Christ is an essential part of the process of salvation. And that's that's the theology. But back to the question, we do create our heavens. And I will say that 99.999999999% of all of these after near-death, afterlife experiences that people report are visions of the Bardo, even the good ones. Even when they say, "Oh, I was there and I saw my relatives and they greeted me and Jesus was there," and all this stuff.
There were unicorns frolicking in a wheat field.
That's an illusion. That's not. You were not in heaven. You were in a gati. Yes, you were in the heaven gati. It was. I'm sure it felt pretty good. But something inside you woke you back up and brought you back to reality. Because see, in Buddhism, the human realm is the most sacred, because it's only here that we can experience both bliss and suffering equally. And that gives us the ability to actually wake up and defeat them both. Just like in Christianity, in order to defeat death, we have to face death, right? By dying, we end death through Jesus, right? That's what he did. And when we follow him, and the result will be the same. We rise just like he rose. That's the whole point here. And Buddhism recognizes that same formula. They just talk about it in very different terms. And, be it for good or bad, I would say that the Buddhist way is a lot more challenging. I would not say a Buddhist has any inability to attain into what we in Christianity call salvation, but I would say their path is a lot more difficult going it their way. They do have a kind of Christ figure in Buddhism called Amitabha. He can be called upon at the time of death, and he will take you to a reality. It's not, honestly, in Buddhist cosmology, it's really, in all intents and purposes, it's a different planet. You'll be born there, and it's a place where there is minimal suffering, and you are able to then, sounds a lot like, almost like purgatory to some degree, and you're able to then use that one lifetime to spend it all on attaining enlightenment. And it's done with the help of Amitabha. It's very grace-like. I mean, I really think what it is honestly the Christian archetype that sort of got into the consciousness of the Tibetans and then became part of Buddhism. I'm not going to say Amitabha is Jesus. I'm not going to say that, but I would say archetypally, he kind of is.
Correlation, definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely a correlation. So interesting thing, but the point is here is that there is a real heaven and a real God, and it's not the one that you think you know. All right. What most of us worship is a false God. The buddy Jesus with the thumbs up, the idea that Jesus is your best friend, and this is nonsense.
Jesus says it in the poor man Lazarus, that let me tell my brother. No, actually, no.
No.
Like once you're in the real thing, there is no.
And this is why discernment's so important. You know, in Buddhism, it's mindfulness. In Christianity, we call it discernment. The kind, again, two sides of the same coin. You really can't have one without the other. It's just one religion emphasizes just one side. I kind of put them together because I come from both worlds, and I have found value in that. But that's a brilliant question, a wonderful question. We can definitely elaborate on that if there's interest. I'll rely on the chat.
It sparks a lot more questions as well. So
Well,
Yeah, it
great.
did.
Then we'll get to that. Let's get to the next one for now. I don't want to spend too much more time on that one.
And so the next question, how can a Christian explain the Trinity without resorting to saying it's a mystery, we're not meant to know everything, or giving an explanation that the early church has already established as heresy, such as Arianism or modalism?
Okay, I thought we were going to have an easy one. It's going to be even harder than the last one. So I'll try to be concise. And again, if we go, you know, if people want to elaboration on this, we can spend the next couple of hours on this. So that's the beauty of having. Well, no, I'm glad you saved this one for open lines, open topics, because at least it gives us time to talk about the rest. But the reality is that I don't like when people say it's a mystery, because it's a cop out.
It's lazy.
It's lazy. It makes it sound like you really don't know. And people that are using this kind of question are probably trying to call you out and trick you.
It's a gotcha question.
It is a gotcha question. The fact of the matter is that it can only be answered theologically. That's the only way to answer it. So the correct way to answer this is each person of the Holy Trinity is fully God. Okay? To put it another way, you can say that there is one God who is three distinct persons, each one which is fully God. That is the Christian theological explanation. It comes from very extensive writings of St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, St. St. Gregory. There are numerous things out there that try to elaborate on that one statement, but there is no statement that's going to be more accurate, and that will ove some of the heresies of partialism and modalism. You don't really want to get into this idea that God just puts on a show or works through a different face, but it's really the same God. He just puts a different face on. That's all inaccurate. Okay, and it's not as though there's three different gods all combining to become one God either. It is 100% fully God, but still three distinct persons who are fully God. And it is the same God that they are fully of. And that is something that can only be answered theologically. It can only be given a context theologically. You cannot try to dumb that down. And the reason why it's a challenge for people to accept that is that we are linear, and God is not.
I was about to say, he's outside of what we know. He's
Correct.
outside of time, space.
So some of these things that seem
Matter.
like contradictions or nonsensical, things that cancel each other out.
Well, it's why we say co-eternal in the creed.
Yes.
They're co-eternal with the Father. In other words, this is outside of time and so. I mean, look, there is a useful synthesis of mystery, and because I agree. The word God's a mystery or the phrase God's a mystery was banned from seminary. When I was at Oxford, it was like, you're not allowed to say mystery, because, mystery in a theological sense for Christians is the acknowledgement that after you've applied your entire mind, your intellect and the intellect of the ages to God, yes, God is still going to be beyond us. That is what mystery means.
Yes.
Okay, but that doesn't mean you haven't got to do the former first. Now, the one way is to say God is utterly beyond us, so therefore we can never fully know God, because if we could fully know God, we'd be equal to God and we'd be gods. So God is simultaneously unknowable to us, but also revealed to us. And so the tradition that has been applied to what formulated the creeds is the apophatic tradition. And that is to say, there are things we can say that God is not. So there's two ways you can say something. You can say what something is. So, I could say, this is a flask or a cup. Or I could say, oh, well, it's not a plate. It's not an elephant. It's not a person.
Yeah.
You know, that's the apophatic tradition. Now with God, because God is unknowable and a mystery beyond our knowing, it's safer to say what God is not. And so the tradition from the church fathers, this is very prevalent still in Orthodox thinking today, and in Catholic thinking too, but we got a bit rational and like to say what things are, but it is to say what God is not. And so if you look at the creeds, for example, they're really dealing with that issue, you know, because they're dealing with the issues of groups of Christians saying, oh, Jesus is half God, half man. Well, no, that's why we have. So we're saying, no, he's definitely not half God, half man. So we'll say he's co-eternal, light from light, God from God. You know, that's the way we approach the Trinity. But we are monotheists. And a lot of the time, we really have to shout that from the rooftop. I work a lot with Muslims who are friends of mine.
Sure.
And you know, and so I say, no, we are monotheists. There is one God Almighty. But to be honest, I have to say it more to Christians who treat Jesus as though he's somehow different.
Something else.
So we are monotheists. Jesus is God.
Again, it comes back to the fact that we are linear and God is not. It's the same. I kind of put this question in the same context, and when people kind of ask me, like, you know, if we were created by God, then where did God come from? Well, that's a silly question, because you have to say that the answer is, well, God always was. And it's like, well, that can't be. Well, it's like, no, it can't be for you because you're linear. But if you remove time from the equation, it's the only way it can be. It's just you can't comprehend something that's outside of the paradigm of what you've been created through. So
because you're created, you can't understand the uncreated.
You can't understand the uncreated. And that's the challenge of it. They're only mysteries to us because we can't extend ourselves outside the framework of what is our nature. And our nature is part of the fallen world. We're not separate from it. You know, it's not like we're like some kind of like perfect creature that now, you know, got broken and we fell into this broken universe. No, the universe and us are one and the same thing. We are part of creation. All right. This creation involves all of what's out there and everything that's in here too. But it's all fallen, it's all broken. And by broken, what does it mean to be fallen? Well, it means to be existing within time. Because what did the scripture say the penalty for the fall was? Death. And where
Toil, death, and pain in childbirth.
And where does death come from? It comes from entropy, right? And entropy is the problem here. All right, that's time. Time causes that, because there has to be, if there's a beginning, then that means there has to be an end. There has to be an end. And that means that since you started, you're going to end one day. That's the consequence of the fall. That's what
an end of time, but not an end of eternity.
Correct. Yeah. So there you go. Okay.
I was looking up because there's a YouTube video out. It's several years old, but it's a debate between an atheist and I guess he's a theologian, Dr. Kent Hovind.
Uh-huh.
And he explains it about the linear God being outside linear time, and he just runs away with it and just shuts everybody up in the theater. I encourage y'all to watch it. It's called "Where Did God Come From?" and just look on YouTube. And it's about maybe
John Lennox is really good on that as well.
Yeah,
the Northern Irish mathematician.
It'll leave you going, oh, you're right. So
Yeah.
I encourage you to look that up.
Yeah, I mean, these are human problems. They're not God problems. So don't apply human problems to God problems. Okay, you don't have to necessarily understand it, because you're not going to be able to. It's kind of like, you can't teach something that's outside of something's nature. It has to be somewhat applicable to their nature to really understand it. It's like the old little story I tell from time to time. It's like, I could invite Father Chris over for a nice glass of 1963 port, and we can sit there and have a great,
please do
time.
I'm crashing that party. Yeah.
We have a great time talking about it, discussing it, maybe smoking some cigars with it. But if I try to share it with the ants that are walking next door, next to me, I'm probably going to kill them. They're not going to understand that this was a gesture of kindness, and they're not going to understand the nuance, and they're not going to really even care. So the fact of the matter is, I can't share 1963 port with an ant because it's outside of their nature. They will never understand it, and there's no way for them to understand it. But it's very easy for us to understand. In fact, there's people that might not understand it, but there's, people that do. And
There's plenty of people who wouldn't appreciate it.
They wouldn't appreciate it,
Yeah.
right? Well, because they don't fully understand.
Right.
So it's the same thing with that. You can only share what is of a person's nature, because God is outside of our nature. We might have a divine nature within us by virtue of being made in his image, but that doesn't mean we're anything like him, particularly now that we're fallen, because we kind of like sacrificed, gave up the last of what made us resemble him in a lot of ways. The only thing that we've retained is the ability to create. That's it. That's about the only thing we've got left.
It also explains why, Christians stress the Christ event so fiercely, is because the unknowable God becomes knowable to us.
Yes. Yes.
In God the Son. So he, to stretch your analogy, you'd have to say, well, the 63 port became an ant.
There you go.
But definitely it's the I mean, Fulton Sheen, blessed Fulton Sheen, used to say, God condescending to become human is like us becoming a dog.
Yeah.
And so that's how much God loves us. He's willing to kind of take on human nature, and so he becomes the. I think St. Paul says the image of the invisible God.
Yes.
I might be wrong. It might be one of the other epistle writers, but the image of the invisible God.
Yeah.
Which is why Jesus is the focal point of our faith.
Well said. Okay. What's our next one, Brandon?
So next one is, have you ever encountered like a generational curse or a curse in general? And how is it different from a demonic oppression?
Yeah, I mean, infrequently we do
we
encounter those from time to time. The way that one would be able to differentiate one from the other is that a generational curse typically will present as a pattern, a typically very extreme pattern of misfortune and what would be like termed bad luck, perhaps. Whereas a demonic oppression presents more so as physical, emotional, psychological, and even spiritual disturbance or illness. And there is sometimes even environmental disturbances associated with that. So that's how we would look at it in terms of a diagnostic way, going into a case perhaps and trying to figure out which one it is. You'll have a lot of people that will, claim a generational curse or something when it's not. What it is it's a pattern of sinful behavior that the family has learned to pass on, because sin is contagious, and behavior is also contagious. So if you have, if you're raised in a family that are prolific sinners, well, chances are you're going to be one too. Unless you can find a way to break out of that cycle. It's the same thing with like any kind of abuse, right? Abusive families that have patterns of abuse tend to perpetuate that cycle.
It's just like an
of abuse.
alcoholic tends to pass that down to their kids.
Yeah. Now they'll try to say it's genetic or something, but I mean, it's beyond that.
Behavior, yeah.
It's behavior. Oh, it's a little bit of both, but it's largely, in my opinion, behavioral. The whole nature versus nurture debate. I think nurture is a bigger part of that factor. I think we can overcome anything by our nature, but I don't necessarily think it's as easy to overcome what has been learned. And when you are successful in a negative pattern of behavior, and what I mean by that is that an alcoholic's very successful at being an alcoholic. You know why? Because whatever they're trying to gratify, usually it's disassociation or something, then drinking's a very easy fix for that. You can succeed at it every single time, but it creates a pattern of dysfunction that continues on. So a lot of people will claim a generational curse when it's anything but. It's actually not demons and it's not curses. It's just you being you, and not really making the kind of correct effort to overcome those things, whether it be spiritual or psychological or both, usually both. Now, a generational curse, like I said, will present, if it's authentic, as a pattern of what seems extreme amounts of bad luck. Demonic oppressions do not present like that. They are more like attacks, things that where usually it's one person, whoever's being afflicted, will have a series of extreme reactions, whether they be behavioral or internal experiences. But it wouldn't fall into this general state, because people that have generational curses don't become possessed by them. Not usually. There are curses that can produce possession. That is true. But now you're talking about a high level practitioner that could create something like that. And most people will never come in contact with someone that would know how to do that. And what are the chances you're going to piss that kind of person off, where they could do it? Now you might be able to hire someone to do, a black magic ritual on an enemy. That could become problematic. But, most of the time, those are very easy to break, because in reality, the hardest curses to break are ones that are generated by the practitioner themselves against a target that they themselves are involved with. Hiring someone to do that is going to minimize the effect. So it would have to be someone that learns how to do it, is successful at it, knows how to be proficient at doing it, and then pulls it off. That's very rare. Okay, the chances of that happening are very, very rare. Not impossible.
Just as an aside, I have come across generational curses, but only from Eastern Europe or Greece.
Interesting. For us here,
here, but from that family, from that tradition, from that family line.
From here, it's mostly Afro-Caribbean, like Santeria or Voodoo.
Ah, of course.
Yeah,
right.
Because that's what we have now. That's what we have the closest connection to.
A lot of our recent ones have,
Yeah. So
someone's put the roots on me.
Yeah, Voodoo, Hoodoo, Santeria. These are where you tend to see the possibility of them. But most of the time, it's not a generational thing like people think. It's just, there's patterns of behavior that need to be overcome, and they need a psychologist usually more than a shaman. But it is what it is. But that's really, I think, the answer.
Trying to convince the clients of that is a lot harder.
That's a lot harder, and then they really kind of take offense when you even suggest it. They really do. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. Okay, we're going to take our top of the hour break now. And I know we've got someone on the line from a Missouri number, I believe.
And we got a lot of questions.
Lots of questions, I see. And I saw a lot of people trying to call in. Unfortunately, you guys hung up before I was able to connect you to the hold. So
he's trying to do everything at once, people.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't have anybody to help with that. So right now we got someone on hold. So please don't hang up, because it might be hard to get back in touch. We will have the number on the line. We are still taking calls. I promise. It's just for the first hour we do the questions from the ether segment. Yes. But going up here, we'll be taking questions. Okay. Priority will go to the phone. So when we come back, we will take this call from Missouri and then the other calls that might come in, and then get to your questions in the chat as well.
And there's plenty to keep us busy.
Great. All right. We'll be back after this. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the second hour of Vestiges After Dark. It's been a great turnout here today. This is great. Great to see all of you and spend tonight with you all. We live for our audience, and you guys are great. So we'll be getting to many of your questions, and we, like I said, have a caller waiting on hold here for when we come back. We'll be taking their question, and if you've been having a hard time getting through, all I can say is just keep on trying. I'll try to get you into the queue if I can. It's a little bit more difficult with this system, but I'll do my best. The number to call is 207-544-1983. That's 207-544-1983. And let's get to it right after this. Okay, everyone. We have got a caller from the 816 area code. I believe that's Missouri. Hello, you are on the air.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes,
Yep.
we can hear you loud and clear.
Hi.
Okay, awesome. Hi. My name is Tristan. I'm with my fiance, Jessica. We're just calling to get your take on a story that kind of happened to us recently.
Sure.
Okay. So basically, my fiance, Jessica, she has a cousin who, and I apologize in advance, this is kind of a sad and tragic story.
Okay.
There's this farmhouse that is in her family that multiple family members in the past have lived in, and pretty much everybody has had experiences one way or another in this house. Some people have said that they've been pushed down the stairs. They've felt like they've been watched by like a big group of people whenever there's nobody there. That's something that she's actually personally experienced. Her cousin, who was 13, reported seeing women in the house holding a knife. And it basically was telling her, things that basically culminated into her having some bad thoughts toward herself and toward her family. She got checked out psychologically. They told her that she was fine, and that was that.
Yeah.
She reported getting touched on her shoulder, and then a few months later, she was diagnosed with a form of bone cancer on that shoulder.
Okay.
There's a lot of other things that I guess I could get into with this house in particular, but everything kind of culminated with the house on 4th of July burning down, unfortunately ending her life and injuring most people in the house. Again, she was 13.
She was the only one
that
she was the only one that died in this fire?
on the scene, yes. So her mother was a meth addict, and she had her boyfriend over, and they were sleeping together, and they both caught on fire. As far as we know, things have been very strange with the family since then, because we've kind of told them this entire time that they needed to get out of there, and it's a long story, like I said. But basically, it culminated with the boyfriend dying a few days later from injuries, and then as far as we know now, the mother is still in the hospital with severe burns and severe injuries.
Did the fire department determine a cause of the fire? Sorry to interrupt you. Just my law enforcement mind's going out.
So, the official thing was it was on the 4th of July, and apparently they did have a party the night before, and there was some simmering, I guess, of the fireworks afterwards, and it just caught fire in the middle of the night. It didn't have working smoke detectors in the house. It was a very, very old house.
Okay.
There was a aunt of my fiance's who used to live there, who did some rituals and stuff like that, and has had very weird knowledge of the house from where she's had in a nursing home now. She would call at weird times and just like jump in on conversations that the family's having. Like there's this one time, the 13-year-old's mom was talking about her time in BMX, which is like bike racing. Yeah. And all of a sudden, they've not gotten a call from her aunt in months. All of a sudden, she calls and says that, hey, I want to know more about her and her bike racing. And she said that they already told her about it. She frequently, I mean, she's in a nursing home for basically psychiatric issues, but she constantly refers to the they or the woman who tells her things that are happening in the house. Whenever she found out the house had burned down, according to some of her family members, her aunt apparently said that she already knew, and she said that she is still alive in the house, and she moved into the barn with the couch, which there is a barn with a couch that used to be in there on the property. A lot of stuff. But basically, I guess the question, something that my fiance has been kind of troubled with, is just the thought of her 13-year-old cousin being stuck and not being able to cross over.
Yeah.
Something that's kind of been on my mind is what kind of spirit would the aunt possibly be dealing with?
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess I'll just leave it there.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, first let me say that I'm very, very sorry that you're going through this, because that's a horrible, horrible situation. It's a fascinating story, but it's a horrible one at the same time. And it shows, I thank you for calling in and sharing it, because it shows just how serious this stuff is. I think people think the paranormal is either nonsensical or it's something to play with, some kind of entertainment that we can have fun with, because it's intriguing and it's mysterious and all that. But this shows the reality of it. This is what we deal with when we deal with authentic situations, which this is almost certainly one. That's you're talking about beyond the usual coincidences that we would look for, and the fact that there's occult rituals that are either known or suspected to have taken place on this property, and then all of the things that sort of culminated. It usually does start out with some kind of history that something sort of triggers it, and then it slowly culminates to the point that eventually someone either gets hurt or dies. In this case, a whole lot more than that seems to have happened. So, this is what it sounds to me. Again, I can only give you a basis on my experience and similar cases. Each case is always different, and when we work a case, we're always surprised ourselves by some of the things that come up through the course of that investigation. So there could be other factors here, but just off the cuff, hearing the story, comparing it to things that I've experienced myself in my work over the last couple decades, I can tell you that this sounds like classic demonic infestation as the direct result of some kind of occult dabbling, or maybe not so much dabbling. It sounds like it might be very serious occult practice.
I'd be curious to see, number one, how old the house was, the property, the history of the property. Can you tell us what
hundreds of years? I think hundreds of years.
And it was a complete loss. The house was a complete loss.
No, and weirdly enough, I'm not sure if they changed their mind about it, but it kind of freaked me out afterwards. After the fire, the entire family just has this weird obsession, because, they all acknowledge that there's things off. For reference, they're all Assembly of God. Me and my fiance are practicing Catholics. I'm a seminarian in the Independent Sacramental movement right now.
Oh,
and
good on you.
Welcome.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Welcome to the fight.
You're amongst friends.
Yes.
Thank
you. You got a crazy life ahead of you. I can tell you that right now.
So yeah, I've been kind of interested in this stuff in a while, but not like this. Obviously, this was like, not something I ever wanted to be around for. But it's there apparently was some pretty severe stuff. There's also severe trauma in the house as well, with like abuse going back generations in her family, of like, doors that only lock from the outside and still have like chains to where literally like, I think like her great grandfather was like chained up or whatever as like punishment or whatever. And I also just want to throw out there too, the timing of things you mentioned, beyond coincidence. Yeah. She had those bad thoughts about hurting herself, and then after those seemed to have gone away, she got cancer in her shoulder. Mm-hmm. she beat cancer, and then 2 weeks later was when the house fire happened that ended her life.
Yeah,
it's-
that's
So it was like one way after another.
It sounds like classic attachment to me. Now, to your question about, not wanting her to be, stuck or put in, some kind of limbo somewhere, because clearly these are not, these are not good situations, and definitely not good conditions in which to die under. What I'd like for you to do is to email the church.
You read my mind.
Yeah, email the church, like the personal name, the full name if possible, and we will say a mass for the repose of her soul, and a divine office as well. And we stream, we stream this. I don't share names online, so I won't give the name, but if you could give us the name so we can put it on the altar, and it's like
I'll do an Office of the Dead for her too.
Yeah. This is the best way to handle that kind of thing, because the dead are most susceptible. The good news is the dead are most susceptible to to the grace that we cultivate when we cultivate it for them on their behalf. That's kind of our job. It's kind of the work that we do. As Christians, that's something that's been forgotten by numerous churches. But Catholics and Orthodox, fortunately, have never forgotten their responsibility to the dead. And they don't just cease being part of the church just because they're no longer with us. Right. So, it's an important part of, I think, the spiritual life of the church, and helping people to give them the best opportunity. God's grace is still very much present. God's grace is very much available. And even if a person dies as the result, which it sounds like here, just again, going off of just what I know from what you told me, even a person who dies as the result of a demonic attachment, or it suffers one, even if it were to be a possession, which I don't think this would qualify, but definitely an oppression, I think, does not have any bearing on what happens to them after they die. That you could die under possession. The devil doesn't win your soul. That's a misconception. What it really comes down to is it interferes with your own understanding and your own process and your own work of salvation, and that's the real danger to it. But it's not as though you can sell your soul, or that you lose your soul because now you're being attacked by some demonic presence. So this is not beyond, for her sake, this is not beyond the church's ability to resolve. And
in fact, I mean,
Father, what are your thoughts?
Just add some comfort to this. I mean, it ties in with what you were saying in the last hour, which is that we are currently living in linear time, and so we may experience this kind of
tragedy
in our own time and space. Yeah, the tragedy, the idea that someone's trapped, and all of that. But eternity is outside of time and space. And the good news is, if you care enough to worry about her, how much more does God care? Mm-hmm. And so, again, this is the kind of, in the gospel, this is the constant refrain, or in the New Testament, in the early church, the fact that we still pray for people in our masses, and we have a concern for people. I have a concern, and I don't know you, and I've never met this person, and I have a genuine concern. How much more does God care about those things? So, just to give some comfort, in the eternal sense, all is well. Despite the trauma and the effects that we experience now.
Yeah. So, I would say, you pray for them. I mean, you don't even need a priest for that. You're already a seminarian, so you're already halfway there. So, you pray for them. You pray for the living, that are still sort of maybe attached to this property in an unhealthy way, and pray for, those who have become victim of this, your fiance's cousin. So, I would say, that's your primary job here. And then, like I said, email the church, office@nicholean.org, NICHOLEAN. You can just go to the website esotericcatholic.org and use the contact information there, and let us know any other details you want. Again, I don't share them publicly. It would be a completely private.
Yeah, I'd be curious to get more details as to where did this happen and
we can,
more history of the house, and because obviously if they're still trying to live on the property, that's not going to be healthy.
No,
there's obviously abuse that's happened there, and it may not be healthy for them to stay.
If you want more guidance on this off the air, also leave your contact information, and we'll reach out and see what because I'm sure there's probably things that you don't want to share publicly, but we'll be more than happy to help any way that we can, because this sounds like an extremely serious situation, and perhaps it's not completely over. From the sound of it, it sounds like there's still members of the family that are perhaps involved here in some capacity. So, I mean, it's definitely a serious situation, and I do appreciate you calling in with this, so that you can share kind of the reality of this work. Because I think, like I said, I think people think it's all fun and games, and it's not.
It's not fun and games, and sometimes we lose people.
Yeah. Very often we do, because people don't take it seriously, or they're and then worldviews get in the way, and you're not the right denomination or whatever, so they don't want help. All sorts of possibilities, but it really, to see the tragedy over and over again is what makes this particular work so difficult, because we can only help such a small number, and sometimes it's resources, sometimes it's time, but a lot of times it's just because people just don't want the help, and you can only go so far. So. This is a terrible situation, but we can do the best that we can to make it better and help you any way that we can. So please reach out to us, okay?
I did want to add one
Thank
thing.
you very much.
Sure.
Before you hang up, if you would like to go to the YouTube feed, one of our moderators had posted a prayer that you could say. That's one of the best things you can do as of right now.
Yeah, the eternal
you can
rest.
just instantly. Yes, you can just do it. That's what we do on our investigations, and we've had a lot of success with it.
Yeah, the eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. May the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. That prayer is really the single most powerful thing to helping a potentially unrested soul. And you would say it for anybody, even if they died in the most perfect of circumstances, in the grace of God, if everything was just right as rain in their entire life, and they died nice and peaceful, you'd still say that prayer.
It's in our funeral rites.
It is, yeah.
When we say funerals, the prayer's in there. The prayers of the faithful.
The good news is you're Catholic, so you have all the tools. The best.
Just don't go over to that property and start doing anything to.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. I mean,
call for some help.
If they want to, I mean, if it gets to the point where they're either,
doesn't sound like they want to, but maybe in the future they will.
If there's ever some concern there, let us know.
But yeah, I mean, certainly
because
don't
of
go
choice
there.
words, we are not welcome.
Oh, I didn't.
I see.
Yeah, I figured not.
It's unfortunate.
So prayer's going to be how you got to handle it at this point,
Yeah, and even if you thought, I can sneak onto the property when they're not there and throw some holy water around, no,
no, don't do
that. First, well, I mean, obviously, priests can do that, but really, the essence of a blessing of a home, for example, it requires the I was going to say the man of the house and be very archaic, but it demands the invitation from the person whose home it is,
correct,
to the priest to bless it. So in other words, you can't really bless a home against the wishes of the owner.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So there's only so much you can do there, but prayers where you can help. You can help at least the victims here, okay? And at that point, prayer becomes the most powerful tool. But yeah, reach out to us, okay? And can talk behind the scenes and see if there's anything else we can do. But thank you so much for your call.
Tristan.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Have a good night. Thank you again for your call. Yeah, I mean, that's a great example, okay? That's a great example of the dangers of the paranormal, okay? Now, don't think that you have to be some expert practitioner of the occult to generate a problem like what they just described. I mean, this was the grandmother? Was it the grandmother that he was talking about?
I believe so. That's in psychiatric care now.
Okay, psychiatric care. I mean, the aunt?
The auntie, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the aunt. If she might have been involved in witchcraft or some kind of thing, got involved in dark practices. It's all possible. And maybe she became very proficient at it. But that can be no more or less dangerous than you just picking up some book and playing around with this stuff yourself. Okay, just because you think it's cool, or just because you think it's exciting because something might happen, like people that play around with Ouija boards and at parties just because they're just looking for some entertainment. 9 out of 10 times, nothing's going to happen. But every now and then, in the right circumstances, in the right environment, with the right kind of people, something can be triggered. And then once you open that can of worms, it's extremely difficult to close it again. And you just don't want to put yourself in that kind of situation. Okay, so make sure that as you go through your spiritual lives, all of you listening right now, take this stuff seriously. Remember, I didn't get into this and throw my whole life at it because it's a bunch of bullshit. All right, I did this because I saw people who needed help. There was nobody helping them. There was nobody that knew how to help them, and I was given a particular place through the grace or mercy of God, I guess, to be able to be that person to help. I wish I could do a whole lot more than I am able to, but overall, we've done some good over the years, and hopefully shows like this do some good, and maybe we can give some peace to this family in whatever limited way that we can. Mass is very powerful, though, and saying a mass for a deceased person is very powerful. Most of the time, when we encounter what seems to the lay person to be a demonic event, is really nothing more than a very unrested person. And then we can just simply, go in there, do what we can do, and then take that information with us, go home and say a mass for them, sometimes a couple masses, a divine office or whatever. And the problem resolves on that basis alone. That's how powerful it is. And that's how useful it is. And I'm grateful that he's a seminarian with the movement, because that will help him a lot too.
Yep.
That would be something that he already has the spiritual foundation and the vocation to do this kind of work. So, he already is, by virtue of that, taking it seriously. So it's always nice to talk to someone like that. I hope he stays in touch.
I hope the people on the property have a change of heart.
Yeah, me too. But you can't count on that. So
Nope.
what you do is you pray.
We've learned
right?
that too. Yep.
That's what you do. Okay. If you got a question, you can call in. The lines are open right now. So I know that there was another caller, a couple of callers that were calling in the first hour. If you're still with us, please give us a call. The number is now on the screen, 207-544-1983. And we'd love to take you on, okay? Let's go, I guess. Brandon, try to get us our first question from the chat, and we'll keep going down the list.
Right, so the first one comes from, at least the first one I could find, comes from April. To go with the discussion from the first hour segment, where do we go while we wait for Jesus to return and restore our bodies?
Well, again, you're kind of talking about a linear time kind of question in a non-linear time kind of problem. Okay. So, again, from God's perspective, everything's already resolved, right? There's no fall anymore. It's already done. Okay. From God's perspective, it's already a complete process. It's already reached its culmination, and the cross does this
finished.
work.
Our Lord said on the cross,
it is finished. But
it is finished.
But we haven't caught up with it because we are linear. And even though his grace can extend through the linear, the primary reason why we don't see him as he is because we just haven't caught up with the rest of the story. And so, where do we go? Well, again, that's that bardo. Okay. You will, if you have attachments, if you did not die or seek the grace of Christ and cultivate the grace of Christ in life, and by cultivation, I don't mean that you're actually cultivating his grace. You're cultivating the relationship that leads to the reception of his grace, which is always free, by the way. It's always freely given. But the work you have to do is the relationship. That's where your effort comes in. Assuming you didn't do any of those things, well, that's when you kind of create, a reality of your own making, and that's what you experience. It's not a place, it's not a time. It's an experience that endures until You make the decision not to. Now, maybe it takes grace to wake up from that, and maybe you never wake up from that. But the fact is, that's kind of what happens to you. So, to get to April's question, the assumption here, though, is that you're talking about someone that has already, attained to salvation, and for most people, that means, from a Catholic perspective, and we're going to give a Catholic answer here now, theologically. Most people are not going to purgatory, right? Most people are not going to die in a state of perfect grace. So purgatory becomes the word that we use for that state.
But it's not a place, because it's not in time.
Exactly. It's not a place, and it's not a time. It's an experience of realization. Okay. Usually that realization.
That's where the medieval church was wrong.
Yeah.
Luther was correct to say talking of years in purgatory is insane.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the Catholic Church corrected itself on that. Well, actually, no, it didn't. It didn't need to correct itself. It never actually taught this idea. It just evil men made money on the back of it. So, but it came back to its senses. But for most of us, it's going to be purgatory. But I think the question behind the question, Bishop, is there's a long-standing tradition between Protestants and Catholics on this that differs. Even in that prayer that we just had, Protestants would say, they wouldn't say soul, they would say, may the faithful departed rest in peace and rise in glory, because they have this idea that we all just sleep in the earth until the last day, and then we're all resurrected together. Whereas Catholics have never taught that. We believe in the immortality of the soul, and therefore, because the soul can't die, it doesn't just rest in the ground until the last day. It continues to be in the presence of God.
But we have to kind of qualify that, because I think some of the issue is, and this is, I think, some of the challenge of this show, because a lot of the questions that we're getting here are coming from sometimes Catholic perspective, sometimes Protestant perspective, sometimes from my students on their metaphysical, esoteric mysticism perspective. And this all gets blended into a kind of like wash of ideas, when in reality I have to usually qualify how we're answering this, because there is a theological answer that's not always consistent with the metaphysical one or the mystical one, and so we kind of have to sort of qualify that. So I think what we also have to remember here is that, and I have to emphasize this because I don't think Christians really get this, Sheol didn't go anywhere. Okay. It isn't like it was some outdated idea that Christians rejected. It was, this is the abode of the dead that Jesus descends into. When they say descended into hell, hell was Sheol. It's the same thing. This is why, Hades, it's the same thing. Hades, yeah. But we got the idea of Gehenna as now that's hell. So this is why it's kind of like the harrowing of hell doesn't make sense anymore to Christians, because they lost the meaning of the word due to bad semantics and new ideas and people thinking that they know what they're talking about when they don't. Sheol didn't go anywhere, but you have to remember what Sheol was. It was this state of in Jewish times permanent unconsciousness. Okay, it was sort of like being nothing or barely something. And that wasn't a soul. It was a spirit. Or you could even say the other way around, because in those times, soul is kind of how we use the word spirit today, and spirit is kind of how we use the word soul today. Shades. The shades, yes. Let's look at those Greek terms again, right? Remember, the soul is the psyche, the self, all right, the identity, and then the spirit is like, that's the pneuma, right? That is the essence or the life force of God. And so in this sense, that light, let's just get rid of soul and spirit, because they've been interchangeably used for so long and they get so confusing. Let's just dispense with them and just get into the meanings for the sake of clarity. The life force returns to God. Okay, so when people say, "Oh, you sold your soul to the devil," when I say you can't, because it doesn't belong to you, what I'm talking about is what animates you, what makes you alive. That belongs to God, and only God can ever have it, and it doesn't even belong to you. That's not even for you to have. You would only get that at the resurrection for all eternity.
That's by the way, that is exactly why the church does not support assisted dying.
Yes.
Because that's why, because we don't believe it belongs to us. This idea that, oh, I can decide when I want to die.
Right.
You know, much as there's also, I mean, I'm not discounting suffering and all the other issues that are related to that, but fundamentally, it's not because the church is mean. It's because we just don't believe it's ours to dispose of.
It's a complex issue.
There's, that is definitely one of the arguments that are presented against that type of right to die philosophy. And we can talk about that tonight too, if you guys want to. But so that returns to God, all right, immediately upon death. So it's sort of true. You see why it's sort of true when people say grandma's in heaven? Well, yeah. If you're talking about just that one part of grandma, the thing that animated her, yeah, that goes back to God. But that doesn't mean it's her. It doesn't mean that she's aware of herself, okay? That would be the psyche. Now, where does the psyche go? If the pneuma goes back to God, if the life force goes back to God, then where does the idea of self go? That's the danger. That's where we talk about Bardo and Sheol and Hades and all this stuff, because that is not eternal. It is not eternal. In fact, even in the resurrection, it does not, it won't be restored in the same way that it is now, which is what we were kind of alluding to in the first hour when we said that one must give their ego up to Christ, right? That's part of the process of salvation. We take Christ on. So Christ replaces that idea of self in a person who attains salvation. Now, that's not something that is easily attainable for someone without the help of his grace. So if a person dies in his grace, then that is taken care of by virtue of the fact that they cultivated it. If, however, they resisted it and died poorly, then at that point, the person would have to work it out. And that's what the church terms purgatory, which is burning off the imperfections that are still standing in the way of a person who's got enough grace to be saved, but hasn't worked it out enough to enter the perfection of heaven. And so it's a multi-layered process. And the reason this is a difficult question to answer is because you can't say, where does a person go when they die? Because what part of them are you talking about? A person is not one thing. And at death, all three things go different ways. The body just rots away. All right. The life force returns to God. The psyche is what we typically refer to as the ghosts. Mm-hmm. All right. And I use the word spirit for that. The ancients would have used the word soul for that. And that's why it gets so confusing with semantics. We have to clarify just with definitions. It makes it easier. So the psyche is what you're trying to worry about. And the psyche is what you want saved, because that's the sense of self. And that's where your identity is going to be. If you aligned yourself to Christ, well, then you're with him. And that's the beatific vision. That's going to heaven. If you still retain your attachments, then you become whatever those attachments are. Now, not just because you have attachments doesn't mean all hope is lost. You could be attached to love. And yeah, at death, that psyche becomes love. And it will continue in that reality and produce an illusion of love that is actually quite pleasant. That would be one of the heaven gati, or even the demigod realm gati, which is less blissful, but still better than what we experience as human beings. But that's besides the point. Purgatory would be working out that psyche, okay? Sheol would be where the psyche just disintegrates. But either way, at the resurrection of the dead, your sense of self as a personal identity, as something separate from everyone else and God, that will cease to exist regardless. That's what does perish in Sheol, or what's been perishing in Sheol.
Which is why there's no marriage in heaven.
Exactly.
Like, all of this is in the scriptures. There's no special relationships in a sense in the heavenly realm because we're perfected and we have perfect communion.
Precisely right. Very well said. Okay, we got another call here from the 973 area code in New Jersey. Hello, you are on the air.
Hi, everyone. This is Lindsay from New Jersey. I had written in my question, but then Father Chris suggested that I should call in. So here's my story. My daughter went to college last year, and she's living in a dorm that's about 100 years old. It burned, the original building had burned down, and they rebuilt this dorm 100 years ago with the bricks from the burned down building. Everything was great for the first couple months, and then things started moving in her room. She would leave things in a certain spot at night and go to sleep and wake up, and they'd be in different places. It seemed harmless, but it still freaked her out because you don't want your things moving around your room.
Sure.
We didn't know what to do, so my husband went to the church, spoke to our priest, and he said, you know, there's good, there's evil. I can bless salt for you. You can say the prayer of St. Michael, the prayer for anyone that might be unrested who's floating around the dorm. So we did that. The activity in her room stopped immediately. But I would say maybe a week or two later, she got a horrendous headache, and it has been there for the past 5 months.
Oh, wow.
She's gone to therapy. She has gone to the emergency room 3 times. She's been on all of the migraine cocktails, multiple prescription medications. She's had 2 MRIs, an MRA, a CT scan, blood work, an ECG. Nothing shows any medical reason why she should be in pain.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're not giving up on looking for a medical reason. We do have an appointment with a headache specialist, but we couldn't get in until October. But I'm wondering, could there be any relation to whatever it was that we tried to push out of her room? I can't help but wonder with the timing.
It does seem odd. Can I ask, it could be environmental. You've got a 100-year-old building that I guess maybe partially burnt down or completely burnt down, and then it was rebuilt. After,
and that's what I wondered,
right,
too.
after several months being there.
Home for the summer.
Okay.
She's been home all summer, so she came home mid-May, and I thought, okay, maybe it was mold or, you know, like you said, just an old building, and the symptoms would go away, and they haven't. She's been like this the entire summer.
So wherever she is, she's experiencing this now.
It could depend on her level of exposure. If it is something toxic, just throwing that out there, something to think about.
Yeah.
And you never want to rule out that possibility.
Right.
I'm glad you're still sticking with
Yes.
looking for medical solutions,
Right.
because even if there is a paranormal catalyst to this, oftentimes paranormal catalysts still produce normal physical reactions that can be treated with normal physical means. One thing that I will say from my own life that might be helpful here is that I never had any headaches at all until I had my first real kind of spiritual experience, supernatural, paranormal, call it what you will, experience that sort of opened up my mind in such a way that the physiological reaction to this after the fact was constant chronic migraines. That years and years of this that never went away. They would have times where they were better and times where they were worse, but they were always there since that point.
How hers is.
I've always had a headache after exorcisms.
They will, yes, we always
every
do.
exorcism I've ever done. I've had a headache.
I keep ibuprofen in my bag.
So we do, yeah, we do, and then we eat greasy tacos, and that seems to help.
Yeah.
But let me give you a little bit of something to try, or you can talk to the doctor about this and see what they think. It's something that's worth trying because it's worked for me. The first thing that I would suggest is magnesium drops. You can get them at Whole Foods. I don't know. I'm sure out where you are, you have a Whole Foods. You can probably get them on Amazon too. It's like a 400. I think it's 400 milligram drop, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Tracy, if she's in the chat, can just confirm that. But what I do is I take that. It's a bottle with dropper. They have them in the little like supplement section at Whole Foods, and I put 4 drops into my morning vitamin C every day. And I will tell you, that has been the single most powerful solution to my migraines that I have ever experienced. Another thing that worked for me was CBD oil, full spectrum CBD oil. Some places that's hard to get, some places it's not a problem. It is legal as far as I know. It's legal all throughout the United States.
Should be all 50, depending on the level.
Yeah.
Of it.
It's even legal in Australia.
Cannabinoids,
So I'm
There you
pretty
go.
sure it's, yeah.
Now you can't take it on like a cruise or something because some of the countries that the ship goes to, it is illegal, and they don't let you bring anything on that could become a violation at port. But magnesium is, clearly legal. So I have found like taking a CBD, full spectrum CBD oil in the evenings before I go to bed, because it does make you sleepy, and then the magnesium in the morning when you wake up. I have found that to completely solve my headache problem, which I do believe, by the way, even though I'm giving you a very physiological solution or potential solution, hopefully, I still will absolutely testify that these headaches are the cause of being spiritually opened by the things that have happened to me in my life, which is very likely what's going on with her. So I would say that yes, they are related, but it doesn't mean you can't solve them medically or maybe just by trying different things. Most people, particularly if you drink, most people are deficient in magnesium. They don't have anywhere near enough. And the only thing I'll be mindful of, take it with breakfast. It can upset your stomach until you get used to it. I have a very sensitive stomach. I've never really had a problem with magnesium though, so it's pretty gentle. The product I recommended. It will make you definitely more peaceful. It will help you sleep better, and it will definitely reduces stress and anxiety if you're prone to those things. So there are multiple benefits here. And it should even help, even if she has to go back to this building and live amongst these
I would
spiritual.
suggest some
Guys,
electrolyte
gotta
powders.
find the same building.
Oh
yeah,
my gosh,
she's one
okay.
room over this year, but the same
Well, see if
building.
it changes. I would also
Yeah.
recommend some electrolyte powder to put in bottled water. She can keep that in the dorm with her and drink up to 2 or 3 a day. It
Stay
may help.
hydrated.
It'll give her magnesium, sodium.
Lindsay, what's her spiritual life like? Is she connected to the church
she
still?
went through CCD. She did CCD her whole life, made confirmation, and I've actually been pushing the church on her. I said to her, if you are in this much pain, I would literally be trying anything at this point. Why not come to Mass with me? I go every Sunday. Why not come with me? Why not try? I've watched your show, listened to your show before.
You have to find
Sacraments. That's what I told her.
Yeah, well,
Certainly
you have to
couldn't
find
hurt.
the right priest, but confession is really where she should go. Now, I'm not saying she's done anything wrong, by the way, and by the way, being possessed is not a sin, right?
Well, fortunately, she hasn't reached that point, so I think we're okay there.
That's right. Yeah, we're not saying that anyway. But I just want to be very clear for you and obviously for the audience that I'm not saying that it's because you're a sinner you've got a headache. That's not it at all. I'm just saying it is the sacrament that is most likely to bring a person to peace, and that can only help.
Okay.
Yeah, it would certainly be good for her.
Yeah.
Finding a good confessor can be a challenge, but or preparing for it, especially if she's not done it as a regular practice. But I would just say, basic sort of diary-like reflection on one's life and not just our shortcomings, but on some of the good things we could have done but didn't do. I think they're a good thing to take to God and to confess. And because it's different from therapy. Therapy's great. I'm pro therapy, but confession ends with absolution and go and move on, and that's a very different message to therapy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I agree with all of that.
Agreed, yeah.
Yeah.
You need both. Yeah.
I agree with all of that. I think, and this is a multi-dimensional approach. I don't think there's ever one solution. I think it has to be holistic. I think most of these problems are best resolved holistically.
Body, mind, and spirit are not separate. Bishop Bryan's been making that point this show.
If one is affected, they all are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So try those things, and and then let us know, after you've tried a few. I mean, we can't make her go to confession if she doesn't. A lot of people are uncomfortable with it. You can encourage it. Definitely getting to Mass would be a good step in the right direction, and see where that takes her. It could inspire her to want to go deeper into the faith. If she's willing to at least try it. That would be best. To have that as a component working in her life. However,
Hit it from both sides.
you know, if you can't get that to happen, at least try some of these other techniques. Like I said, magnesium works wonders for headaches. And as far as the building, okay, and what might be going on there, I would say the same prayer that we gave the last caller, you know, eternal rest grant to them, unto them, O Lord. You know, typical Catholic prayer. Most Catholics know it by heart. Have her recite that. She doesn't even have to, you know, have a prayer life to be able to utilize this. It's something that she's doing on behalf of everyone else, and not even for herself. But you know, a lot of times, if there is a spiritual disturbance that's causing a physiological response like this, which is very possible, I can't say definitively over the air whether or not it is that, but I would say it's definitely possible, maybe even probable in many cases. I would say then that by virtue of maybe she's sensitive, maybe she's a good candidate for connection. And if there are disturbances in that building, unrested people, they will latch on to the one person they feel could get their attention. And sometimes if there's a psychic block in the sense that the person isn't ready to see them or experience them, then it comes across as some kind of physiological response, which is usually a painful type of reaction. And by doing this, saying a prayer for the dead, helping them to move on, it can release the pressure that's causing that physiological response, assuming that it is. The good news is it doesn't harm anything to do. So even if it's not related, and this might be a way to find out, if she's able to quiet down the building and she still has the headaches, then chances are it's perhaps related to either being opened up and now she can't close it back, or it's something else that's going on. It could be just, you know, mineral deficiency, maybe, you know, not hydrating enough. Most people don't. There's lots of factors that could be contributing here, but I would say it's probably a lot of different things. You might have been just vulnerable at the right time for the right type of spiritual disturbance to interfere with her, causing this to now become a chronic issue. But give her some peace of mind. It is not without the chance to resolve. I mean, I am a testament to that. I had that exact same experience and the exact same kind of reaction to it. And I'm headache free now. I mean, I maybe get 1 or 2 headaches a year, and they're very mild.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and I used to have them chronically all the time, to the point of the aura. I don't know if she gets the visual aura.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that's the worst. And I can tell you right now, those were always the worst during the spiritually heightened moments. So it's kind of like the body trying to say, look, you need to see this. So what you see is you see blindness, you know, and it's almost like as if it's archetypally telling you, you know, you're not paying attention. So you need to open your eyes. And of course it blocks out your vision. It's almost like temporary blindness for a while. It's a type of seizure, really, is what it is. And it's kind of like, this is just how our bodies, our frail, broken, fallen bodies, try to respond to data points that we're really not supposed to come in contact with, but every now and then we do. And
maybe if it takes if you've got a headache that's sufficiently bad enough, you'll try anything to get rid of it, and maybe that's what it takes to get someone to the confessional booth.
It could. Yeah, and
or to mass, or to re-engage with their faith.
I would at this point, I would just try to encourage her to come to mass, go to communion, okay, and let her receive at least that, and then it could inspire her to take it deeper. Confession would be best, you know. Maybe mention it, but I wouldn't push it too hard because you don't want to scare them off either.
No. Or get to resist. You don't want that.
Yeah, because then it just becomes feeling oppressive, and you know, the church shouldn't feel oppressive. It should feel
you against her.
Yeah,
like, you know, you don't want that.
Right.
Yeah. This could be a way to kind of deal with that. Another thing that also helps me, very simple, is just get an ice pack and keep it on wherever part of the head she gets it the most. For me, it's like right here. So I put an ice pack right here, and then I'll put it, once it's been there for about 5 to 10 minutes, I'll put it on the back of my neck, and that sometimes takes care of it too. These are all different strategies she can try, but please, you know, let us know how it goes. Call back into the show in a few weeks
Yeah.
and let us know if any of this has been helpful. And if not, maybe we can, if you want to talk to us, you can also, email the church at office@nicolaitan.org. And if there's other things here that you want to discuss off the air, we'd be more than happy to talk to you as well.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you
good
for
luck.
calling in.
Thanks for
good.
calling in.
And we'll pray for you guys.
All right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All
ma'am.
right. Bye.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Another great question. And hopefully something that can be helpful, because there's a lot of people there. So let's take our next break here before we get into it. And we'll take more of your questions when we come back. Don't go away.
I've been cold for so long. One touch and we're igniting, setting fire to it all. These flames ain't going out. This building is crumbling to the ground. Don't think that we can stop it now, 'cause baby, our love is gonna burn down. These flames ain't going out. This building is crumbling to the ground. Don't think I wanna stop it now, 'cause baby, our love is gonna burn it down. One spark, I feel lightning blazing up through the darkest nights. Hold your breath, babe, the smoke is burning. Now kiss me up and we'll be alright. These flames ain't going out. This building is crumbling to the ground. Don't think that we can stop it now, 'cause baby, our love is gonna burn down. These flames ain't going out. This building is crumbling to the ground. Don't think I wanna stop it now. Baby, our love is gonna burn it down. If I changed everything, the way I walk, the way I breathe, will my fate shift into the night? But here I am, same old thing, sinking deep, no ecstasy. Reality haunts the living mind. If I saw another day, only to scream into the night. Nothing ever tries to change, even if I want to realize. 'Cause I've been sitting here, same old ways, taking off about the same mistake. Darling, where you going? It won't be as simple for you. that's the time. Maybe once, maybe twice. Turned around to save the time. Now I know how to leave the sign. If I saw another day, only to scream into the night. Nothing ever tries to change, even if I want to realign. 'Cause I've been sitting here, same old ways, taking off without the same mistake. Can I leave it all behind? Follow all the leading signs. When the dark is growing and the light is closing in, tell me where you're going. Won't be a simple voyage.
Welcome back, everyone, to the final hour of Vestiges After Dark. We've been having some great questions and calls tonight. What a great, I mean, it feels like a real show. You guys have been fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you, for making this such a wonderful show tonight. You know, this is our favorite kind of show to do. Open lines, open topics. It's your show, you know, and we do this for all of you. And we thank you all. Thank you to all of our super chats out there, and all of you who donate to keep the show on the air. We really appreciate that as well. And this next hour here, we'll be taking more questions, of course. And you can also continue to call into the show. Lines are open right now, 207-544-1983. That's 207-544-1983. And when we come back, more of your questions answered. Don't go away. calling in from the 559 area code in California, I believe. Hello, you are on the air with Vestiges After Dark.
Hello, guys. How's it going?
Doing great.
Hello.
How about you?
Hey, is that Ace?
Yeah, it
Might
is
be.
me.
Ace,
Okay, hey, Ace.
You're a long time.
It's like I recognize the voice.
Yeah.
So, I have a couple of questions, two completely different questions, and it's up to you guys whether you have the time and would want to answer them. But the first one, I'm just gonna, it's gonna be like a general outline of like my topic, and I apologize for sounding a bit selfish, but it's something I'm struggling with. So,
Sure, okay.
any tips or info on for a young, I would say for a man of my age, I'm 29. I have a family. I would say I'm struggling spiritually. And I know I have like you guys through the internet, but like I was talking to messaging Father Chris. I don't know. To me, I'm perceiving it as difficult. Like it's so much better like in person. You know, I'm more of a hands-on person, and it's.
Of course.
I would love for you guys to be closer. And so I don't know. I'm just like struggling. Like I have two daughters, and my wife. I call her my wife, but we're not technically married. So we're living in sin. And I remember a couple months ago, Mr. Willett, you told me that you said basically to try to like harvest basically like a platonic relationship with her. You know, try to make the best out of it. But I'm still struggling. Like, so I would say things have improved. You know, she does want to pursue church more, but she's more like pursuing the Protestant church, which is fine, you know, but like you made comments. So she likes to go to the church where they display like a big concert. And to me, that's like, I'm past that in my spiritual journey, but yet there's no churches like the ones you provide, you know. I feel like it's more serious with the church that you have. I don't know. I just feel like I'm stagnant. I've listened to one of your recent masses like a couple weeks ago where you were saying that if you're stagnant, you're not doing something right. You know, you're kind of like, I don't know, kind of just waiting around. That's what I feel like I'm in my life.
Yeah.
And as a young man, I just feel like maybe I'm I'm struggling with egos in the workplace. Like I can't stand people who are rude.
Yeah.
It's just so hard. I don't know. I'm perceiving life as kind of like difficult, and I know it's hard to follow Jesus, and I'm finding it extremely hard. And it's hard to be kind to people who are mean. Like I can't stand being bullied. So I feel like I don't know. I'm kind of like all over the place. Bottom line, I'm struggling.
Ace, you're only finding these things hard because you're trying. Like, and this is the weird thing, right? Because before people really wrestle with the meaning of life and you know the gospel message and what have you, to a certain extent, their life is easier because when you start reading and taking on board and taking seriously the message of God, it inevitably leads to struggle because now you have standards. You know, and now you're holding yourself to those standards, and we do hold other people to those standards, which is not a bad thing, by the way. It's just, we just can't reach a point of condemning people, and if we're getting angry about that, then we've got to find a way of synthesizing that with our lives. But you know, if you're finding it difficult and irritating and all the rest of it, it's because actually your standards have been raised. In terms of which church you go to, look. If you find the perfect church, whatever you do, don't join it or tell anybody because you'll wreck it and everybody else will. Okay, so there is no perfect church. Obviously, I'm not. I was a Protestant. I'm not a Protestant now, so I'm not. You know, I am convinced by Catholic truth. But I would say that going to a bad church with your family is better than going to no church with your family. So if that's the compromise, then don't dismiss it out of hand.
Here's what I'm going to suggest. I agree with what Father Chris said. If I could only add that, one of my biggest struggles is that, and Jamie will tell you, my wife will say the same thing. I always said, I don't know. I really do not understand why this church was established here in Georgia. because if I had $1 for every time somebody from California or the West Coast said, "What I wish your church was out here," we would probably have a massive institution, because people in Georgia just don't care about us. There's only a handful of people. Most of them don't show up. It's really, most of our actual support comes from your area, and that is where the church should be. I wish it was over there. Maybe someday something can change about that. It might not be California, but I could definitely envision being back in Nevada again. I miss living in Nevada. But anyway, to your question, as far as like the church situation, okay, there's nothing to say. Look, this is a common thing where, spouses or, significant others or whatever have their own respective ideas as to what makes them comfortable in terms of religion. And at least you're not going outside of the Christian religion. That helps a lot. It makes it much more challenging when you marry outside your faith or get into a relationship with someone outside your faith, because then that tends to be when somebody, usually the more fervent one, dominates the other person. And you don't really want that. What I would suggest you guys decide to do is, why don't you agree to go to each other's churches? There's nothing that says you can't. I mean, yeah, it does kind of double your obligation on Sunday, but it's something that you could do as a gesture, or maybe even alternate one time with them, with her church, one time with yours, every other week. Something of that nature could be, I think, a good compromise here. And who knows? You never know that one of you, she might come around to Catholicism and say, this is great. Now, the challenge here, of course, is finding a good Catholic church. And I can't promise that you'll find that where you are. I don't know. I'm sure there are some, but you have to kind of check around and find something.
But if it's rubbish, join it and make it better.
Yeah, make it better. That's the other side of the coin. I mean, you're not going to find something like the Nicolaitan Church anywhere. It's kind of a unique thing, but you do have the online masses. And then, what a lot of our people do is they watch the online masses like you've been doing, and then they go to their local church for the sacraments. And even though they don't enjoy their local churches. And for the
koinonia, you are supposed to be with Christians where you live. We are supposed to be, people that pray for, support one another, and we certainly, the Holy Nicolaitan Church does that. But you do need to be like in proximity to other people, and so like I say, even if you go there and it's a church full of people that are very different from you, they're different generation, what have you. Actually, there's a real discipline and wisdom and grace in learning how to love that, despite that they might not be your people, or
and ultimately, spiritual life is supposed to be challenging. It's supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. So the fact that you are experiencing these discomforts is a sign that, like Father Chris said in the beginning, it means you're making the effort.
Yeah.
If it was easy, then it wouldn't have any merit. It wouldn't produce any fruit. It has to be hard.
And we all struggle with it. You are not alone.
No, and look, just because I'm a bishop doesn't mean it's any easier. Right. I would say that the challenges only become more difficult. It becomes harder as you go up the ladder. It doesn't get easier. So that's the mark of a Christian person, and it's also a sign that you're doing it right. Stagnation is not always a problem. I don't remember exactly which sermon you were referring to, but I want to make sure I clarify that stagnating is not necessarily an issue. You're going to have moments where you plateau. I think I remember the sermon.
And he's not sitting in stagnation on purpose. He's hungry. He wants to move on.
Different.
So that's the difference in it.
The kind of stagnation I'm talking about is that, people will only let themselves go so far, and then they stop. And then what happens is their spiritual life plateaus, and then they'll wonder why they're not making any progress, because, they're like, well, God's not listening, or God's not doing this. And they blame everything else except for the fact that they didn't make the effort. I don't think that's you at all. I think you are making the effort, which might be why you're getting a little impatient with not just yourself, but others, Because like Father Chris said, you're setting a higher standard now, and the more you do that, the more you grow in Christ, the more difficult that gets, because the more of the disparity you will start to see. And the real challenge is now, how do you still fulfill the command to love everyone when you start to see how everyone is such an asshole?
Yeah, you start to see everybody's flaws. Everybody's flaws.
How do you? You have to resist despair.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. So I don't think these are. I think these are actually good signs, and
these are good problems.
Good problems to have, and not beyond solutions. I think you're already working in the right direction. But those are the suggestions I would have. Share. Go to each other's churches. If you're willing to go to hers, she should be willing to go to yours, and maybe alternate or do both. Lots of options there. And then as far as finding a church that's like ours, well, you're always welcome to come out if you can. We have the retreat house. It is available. Become a member of this church, and it's open to all of our members. And then you can you can come whenever you want and receive the sacraments when you visit. And there's no charge for staying at the retreat house. You just have to get yourself there. That's it.
I would actually like to add something, because I was in a similar position. We're similar in age. Whatever church you find, be sure that they love you asking questions, that they encourage deeper thought, because nothing's more destructive, in my opinion, than a church that says, don't question, or it's just what it is.
That's a tall order.
It's
a tall order, but you can try.
And we wish you luck.
Even in the Catholic faith, you might not be as lucky to find a church that is open to questions. But just because you go to a church that has lousy laity or lousy clergy or both, actually expect it. It's probably going to be more likely that you find a place that's not great than a place that's wonderful. It doesn't mean there's not grace there to be had. Like I said, get your spiritual nourishment from us on YouTube, but get your sacraments from them. It's not ideal, but it's what almost every one of our members has to do. And sometimes they come down and visit, and then they get the sacraments, and they get to attend Mass in person with us. And that kind of holds them over until they can come back again. Again, it's the best that we can offer at the present time with this ministry, but there's things that you can do, and I think you're already in the right direction. You really are. Now, you said you had another question?
Yes, I did have another question. I would like to thank you all for the input, and I did let my partner know that you did offer to baptize our children. We are working on getting them baptized with the local Catholic church, so
Good.
It's a slow process. It's like you said before. It's kind of it depends on the situation, I guess, but it's kind of hard to get a hold of them because they're kind of big, and I don't know, it's a bit difficult. But anyway, thank you for answering that question. It makes me feel better. My next question is a bit, I don't know, I guess some would call it supernatural, paranormal.
Okay.
So it has to do with Sasquatch, ETs. We could include I guess, demons or spirits, but it's mostly in regards to, also portals. And it has, I want to speak about individuals such as Dave Pilates, Dr. Stephen Greer. And I think, Mr. Ouellette, I would say the things you talk about just kind of, it reminds me of those two individuals. And I'm just so fascinated at the work that Dave Pilates, basically, there's people that go missing in forests, and I'm aware that you live in Atlanta, right? And I think you lived at the lower area. I forgot what, you used to live somewhere, the Appalachian Mountains. Well, people go missing in those areas. So, what are your thoughts on Sasquatch, Miss Jamie? I know you have some native background, right? Maybe you have stories about Sasquatch or Bigfoot. I think that God, I think Jesus is God, but Sasquatch does exist, and ETs. Maybe I'm sounding a bit like if I'm stuck in a paradigm, but if these things exist, maybe God created them. I don't know. Maybe He didn't. Maybe they're just their own entity. I don't think they're demonic, but it's crazy to me how people go missing. And I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on portals, and even little people? I know there are like such as elves or gnomes, or even fairies. I know it might seem so odd, maybe even superstitious, but some people actually do believe in this. And there's some people like in I think the country of Sweden or one of those countries over there that they don't like when they want to build roads, they don't demolish the natural mountains or boulders because they think that elves live in them.
I think
So
that's
what are
actually in
your
the
guys'
UK,
thoughts?
isn't it?
And,
It might be.
somewhere over
Sounds
there.
more
I
like
don't know.
Ireland
Maybe
to
you
me.
guys don't have enough.
Could be.
Look, I think that, well, first of all, if it exists here, it's part of creation. So therefore God produced it. There's nothing here that God did not produce. And since God produced all of reality, then anything that is real is from him. So I think where we get a little bit confused and why it starts to feel a bit mysterious and supernatural is because we're very comfortable with the corporeal. We're very uncomfortable with the incorporeal. And there are species that we come to encounter just by virtue of the work that we do. There are species that, just like us, where we're primarily corporeal with an incorporeal capacity, there's those that are the complete opposite,
yeah.
where it's entirely incorporeal or just partially physical, but not really, where it does sort of have some appearance, but it doesn't behave the same way that it would in a scientific sense, which is why you might have situations where it seems like they're walking through dimensions or portals or something, or where they're very difficult to capture. And, to date, there's nobody that's ever been able to produce evidence of a Sasquatch or or any.
Well, not conclusive evidence.
Well, most of the time when they
hair samples that are
but when you get like people that produce evidence, it's almost always determined to be a fraud every single time.
There is that issue.
And that doesn't help.
No, it doesn't, because it takes away from the actual people legitimately trying to investigate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say,
Guys, I'm gonna just I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'm gonna hang up. But I will continue listening to the show. But
Okay.
thank you
Sure
guys
thing.
so much.
Thank you, Ace.
Much love to you guys, but I will continue
Thanks,
listening. But I need to go run some errands. But I will be listening.
No worries.
But thank you guys.
Right back at you, man.
thank you.
Be safe.
No worries. So yeah, I
I
mean,
also, I guess one thing you could add, if you would like to listen more, I think back in November of 22, we did have an expert on where we discussed about Sasquatch.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
an episode out
I
there.
think his name was
Yeah.
Dave, too.
But my feeling is that these are largely incorporeal beings, primordial spirits, elemental spirits. That definitely makes up a lot of the fae, gnomes, or elementals that are literally of one of the four elements. These are all things that we do encounter in this work, largely only understood to most people as myth or a type of fictional mythology, without understanding sort of how that plays out in the rest of the metaphysical realm. So I would say that that's where they fall into. Now, aliens, I would say, is a completely different thing. Okay. And I'm not going to even, let me just add as a caveat, I'm not even going to dismiss the possibility that some of these things are not thought forms. Okay, which would be a whole other ball game, but still, again, another type of incorporeal creature, but largely with a completely different genesis. But aliens, and I can say this from personal experience that I've talked about on this show, but also with cases that we've sometimes received. Most of our alien cases came in before you were with us, Jamie, but we've had a few. And I can tell you that those are the ones that are the most difficult to classify and resolve, because they don't follow any of the normal patterns that we see with all of the other manifestations of what we call paranormal phenomenon. It is its own thing, and disturbingly so, because this is where you get into some, and we've had some shows on this topic that probably go into this with far more detail than I'm about to or able to right now. But I will say that what I have seen disturbs me with this. I am not beyond the opinion. I'm not definitive on anything because I don't have the information to be definitive, but I will say I am not beyond the opinion that they are exactly what people say they are. You know, creatures, perhaps not with the best of intentions, from other worlds that somehow have technology that allows them to come here and influence the development on this planet. As you start to see what's going on, you know, particularly in recent times, with this now being normalized by mainstream media,
this whole
even
disclosure
President
thing.
Trump and the disclosure and everything else. I mean, Trump's saying the American people are ready. They're ready to know the truth. You know, you get the UAP things and all this other stuff that's going on. Clearly, there is something going on, and clearly, it is not something that that is normal. You know, it's not like it's something that's been always, you know, we've always known about it, but we just kept it quiet. You know, I'm not unconvinced. I'm not convinced, but I'm not unconvinced that this is exactly what they say it is. And that leads us to wonder, what is the overall dynamic here? What exactly is going on? And where does that fall into the overall worldview of religion? Because then you have to ask yourself, well, I mean, if there are species from another planet here interacting with this one of more advanced technology, more evolved perhaps, then do they need salvation like we do? Are they fallen like we are? You know, do they believe in God? Do they even understand such things? Does it matter to them? You know, or you could be like, you know, where it really gets kind of dark and disturbing for some people. And this has led to, I think, some of the mystery of it and some of the resistance of the governments to be forthcoming, is fear that it could lead to a crisis of faith. On the basis that what if it was determined, or as believed by some, that they seeded this planet,
The
you know,
Anunnaki.
that they took their own DNA and seeded it with a primate, and that's what expedited the evolution of advanced primates on this planet. I mean, all of these are possibilities. Does it negate the existence of God? No, because I think that, you know, this would even be more reason for Christ to come and try to save this planet. So I don't think it changes anything religiously. The church definitely doesn't seem to think it does. And the church does, make no mistake about it. The Catholic Church does have conversation about this. They have. There is a lot of conversation right now because it's been in mass consciousness. And I'm sorry, but you cannot dismiss the fact that you had Roswell, and then suddenly technology just went freaking crazy after that. We lived pretty much the same as we always did for thousands of years until Roswell.
Well, doesn't the Vatican own one of the biggest observatories?
That's a big one. Yeah, it does.
But, I was going to say the greatest lie of the postmodernists is that science, discovery, technology
negates religion.
And the church.
Yeah.
Right.
The church is opposed to those things. It's absolute garbage.
Some of the greatest scientists of all time were Catholic.
Yeah.
The guy that basically discovered DNA was a priest. Like, I mean, it boils my blood.
Yeah, we can.
Because it's entered into sort of mainstream.
It's almost absurd.
You know, unthinking consciousness that the church is opposed to science. It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's absolutely not. There would be no science. There'd be no modernity and therefore no post-modernity without the church. It's just crazy. Yes, they arrested Galileo. They talk about that. You know,
but it wasn't quite for the reasons that are being said either.
That's right.
It wasn't so much that, oh, how dare you say that the Earth isn't the center of the universe. It had a lot more going on than just that.
That's right.
But yeah,
they apologized.
Yeah, they did. I mean, and profusely over and over again. They still are, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's how we answer that. And we can talk a lot more about aliens in the future because it is a topic that fascinates me. I think we have coming up on the fall season.
October.
Yeah, we have a conversation. Regan Forston's coming back to talk about him having in his hypnotic, when he does hypnosis, his sessions with his clients, people that are reporting alien abductions and things like that. So it should be very interesting to talk to him about what he has experienced with through his clients. So that's coming up this fall, so you don't want to miss it. But let's get on to some questions. I know that there was a question about should people donate through the Super Chats. Okay. The super chats were activated by me. I thought it'd be more clear as to how to work with them. And now I got it activated. I don't know how to turn it back off. But super chats are fine. I will eventually figure out how to collect the money. I have not yet. But I can tell you this, that from what I understand, YouTube takes like more than half of it. So if you want the church to get your entire donation, it is much better to go to esotericcatholic.org and click on the donate now button and do it directly from the church's website. That way the church will get all of your donation, not just 40% of it or whatever it is. And there's also, the moderators put a link out there all the time. There's the QR code right here, right beneath this hand right here, wherever it is. Yeah, that QR code you can click. And it will take you directly to the church's donation portal, that the church gets the entire thing. You can even tell it to pay the credit card fees, so that if you want to donate $100, you can click that box and it will charge you like $102 or whatever it is that YouTube gives us a good rate. But it's still, you can even tell it that, no, I want the church to get the full $100. I'll pay the credit card fees. You can even do that through that portal. With super chats, we get about 40% of whatever you donate. So it's probably not the best way to donate to us. If you want to, it's a great, you're thinking of us. We're
it's
grateful.
all appreciated.
It's all appreciated. If super chat works better for you, go ahead. But it is better for the church if you go through the website and do it there. Okay. What's our next question? I'm trying to get through as quickly as we can. We'll try to muscle through these.
So Brandon, I saw one from Lisa way back.
Yeah. Yes, I missed that one.
And it rolled off. So I don't know what the exact words were. So Lisa, if you're still in the chat, could you
yeah, so
help
I
me
got
out?
it here.
Oh, do you? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, she asks, when we investigate, how is it that the spirits we're communicating with learn our names and our group name? It's my understanding that what we are talking with is just remnants from people who died.
Yes, and that's again back to the fact that you're trying to ask a question from a linear perspective that does not have a linear answer. You are not, your awareness, okay, is not one thing, okay? You're made up of, again, what we talk about constantly: body, which is the physicality, the corporeal part, and then spirit and soul, which make up the incorporeal parts, okay? At death, these things disperse in different ways. Two of them degrade, one returns to the source from which it came. So what typically, if you are communicating with a spirit at all in an investigation, what you're communicating with is what the ancient Greeks would have called the psyche. Okay, that is the completely incorporeal part of a person's concept of self. It is where the identity comes from. It is where the idea of self comes from, and it is essentially created by the root of intellection of the mind that is held by the brain while that body is alive. Okay, but at death, the brain dies too. Okay, the brain is part of the corporeal side. So then, all you have left then is what that brain was able to produce, an echo, a shadow that sort of exists and gets stuck in the ether. And it will still continue to behave and respond in the same ways of expectation that it had while it was alive and connected and conscious. It will even behave in a conscious way, even though it is not. It is just an echo, but it is like an echo you can talk to, because it's an echo of expectation. It is part of what we produced through our idea of self and the identity that we built around it through the ego reality. That is what you're talking to. And I can be completely frank with you. It is a meaningless thing to converse with. It has no intrinsic value other than the fact that if it is connected to a negative attachment or even a positive one, it prevents the essence of what that person was from entering into salvation. At the very least, it delays it. At the very worst, it prevents it. All the more reason to stop talking to these things and start moving them on. not to be fascinated by the fact that they might know your name, because, you know, the expectation is that they would know your name. So therefore the expectation produces the result. But that doesn't make it remarkable. It just makes it what it is. Again, it's like an intelligent echo. It's like the echo. You can yell out into the cavern and it yells back something and answers your question. But that's all it's doing, just because it's expectation. Okay? It doesn't have any benefit. What the benefit is move this energy on so it dissipates, can no longer affect the living, and then whatever essence of that person continues to exist in that attached, tormented reality can then be liberated and truly rest in peace, as these tombstones say. Okay, but that's how it's able to do it, because it's a product of the expectation. You would expect me to know your name, and I'm nothing more than just an ego reality that currently has a corporeal connection. But take away this corporeal connection, kill me now. The expectation of my knowing your name's still there. And even if I don't know you, if I meet you for the first time, whether corporeal or incorporeal, there's still an expectation that you will share your name and I will know it. And because your incorporeal nature is just as exactly the same as their incorporeal nature, the information's not, it's not obscured like it is when you're talking on a tangible level between two people. Like, I can hide things in my mind that Jamie here cannot hear or see. Okay. But it's just stored in the incorporeal. Now, anything that's incorporeal technically has access to it. So it's not as private or as missing, or as personal as we like to believe it is. It's just the incorporeal nature, and it's all part of the ether, because it's not something that's isolated. It's just one channel within the giant ether of incorporeality, which makes up, by the way, the majority of this cosmos. Most of this cosmos is unseen. Very, very little of creation is seen. But God rules it all, seen and unseen. Okay? And again, we're getting into like very deep metaphysics here, but that's a kind of a metaphysical question. There's not really a theological question there. But that's how that works. That's how they're able to do it, because it's why wouldn't they be able to do it? That's the expectation, you know? I mean, they still, a lot of times this energy still thinks itself to be alive. And so it's going to behave as though it's still alive because it expects itself to be alive. And that means it's going to find out names and try to talk to the people that are talking to it as it would when it was alive. It's just an expectation factor, not remarkable in any way other than that. But that's how it's able to do it. And a lot of times, it's not even a spirit you're talking to. You're just getting an echo of your own consciousness that you're putting out there, because your entire consciousness is incorporeal too, also part of the ether, and it's echoing out there the same way theirs is. And most of the time, because you go into an investigation with an expectation that there are spirits there, then your mind is going to produce an echo that meets the expectation, because that's what it's designed to do. And you've been taught since the time you were a child to cultivate your life that way. Why do you teach a kid to develop skills? Because there's an expectation that they're going to need them. So you create the expectation in youth so they cultivate them and then can use them later on. Same thing here. It's no different. But it's not really all that good for breaking attachments. Expectations are really bad for breaking attachments. And that's what creates the illusion of our life. Now, it's okay if you understand that and work within its framework, but where it becomes a problem is when you start to believe it. That's where it becomes a problem. And because then once you believe it, then you see it at the exclusion of everything else. And that's what holds us back from developing and growing spiritually. So that's the caveat to it. But that's the answer to that question. I mean, I don't want to spend too much
chew on that for a little while.
Yeah, chew on that for a little while. Let's get to the next one. What's our next one?
So the next one, okay, so we answered that one. Comes from Jay. I was talking to a friend about Jesus' prayer and the peace that you get from giving all your problems to God, and she laughs and says it's wrong. BS.
I think it was the Jesus prayer. As
The
in,
Jesus prayer, yeah.
Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I think it's that.
Yes. So do I continue to try and reach her or let it be?
Tell me the first part of the question again. I just want to make sure I understood it correctly.
I caught the question when it came in. I think the idea was about, when you can see somebody who you want to help in this way,
like anybody.
Do you well, a friend.
Okay.
Do you persist in that? I mean, look, my quick advice in the chat was, a battle of wills is not a very good way towards somebody reaching a spiritual encounter.
No.
If you just become the thing that they can resist, probably what they're resisting is within themselves, right? Because we believe it's to be the truth. And so it's best to let them figure that out. Like
it is.
Somebody said,
she's got a friend.
I think it was you, Jamie.
Yeah.
You said she planted a seed, right? Or somebody said that in the chat.
I think that's all you.
I basically told her to knock the sand off her feet. Because so you're trying to help a friend and you're trying to help them a way you know how that works for you, and they absolutely dismiss it and don't take you seriously.
Yeah, that's when you're done.
There's no need to pursue it.
No, you don't pursue that beyond that.
They're not taking you seriously, and they don't appreciate you trying to help them. All you can do is continue to pray for them.
If there's an interest, if there's an active interest, if they come to you, that's one thing. And like certainly when people come to me, I'm brutally honest, okay? Because look, you're taking the time of the church. You're employing the ear of a exorcist or pastor, whatever the capacity is, to help you through a spiritual issue. At that point, that assumes that you want my involvement. So at that point, I'm going to be a little more brutal than I would with somebody that I might meet on a cruise ship while I'm drinking at a bar that starts a conversation about his lifestyle and maybe, it's not the best Christian direction he's going. I'm probably not going to get too actively involved in that conversation because first of all, he didn't ask me for anything. Second of all, it's kind of out of context. And third of all, it doesn't really help them. What you really want to do is set the example. Now, you as a friend have the ability to set an example to everyone that you meet. And that's really all that's expected of you as a Christian. You are not commissioned to go and interfere with people's lives. You're there to serve in whatever capacity God calls you. And
let them see your fruits.
Exactly. Your fruits are going to speak much more loudly than anything that you could try to convince them of. And again, we're not called to convince anybody. We're called to respond to people. And that sometimes means responding appropriately to wherever they're at in the case. And most of the time people are not ready for it. So you know what? You just be an example, and that's it. That's your ministry. That's your missionary work. That's as far as it needs to go. Like my YouTube channel, right? Like this one, like what we're doing right now. I mean, I'm not out there shoving this down people's throats. I'm not going out there on the street being like, you better tune in or else. It's there. If people want to listen to it, here it is. And it stays up there for all eternity in the archives. Anybody can tune into it whenever they want. We had about 50 downloads from India just this past week.
Interesting.
We're reaching people all over the world, and it's wonderful. I'll never know any of these people, but you know what? We're having an impact, and I'm not having to force anything. They found me. They find value in it. They download it. It's all their free choice. That's all that's required. I made it available. That did my duty. I made it available, and now if they want to take it, it's there for them. And that's all you need to do. Are you
saying that if I go on my holiday to Bombay, Madras, Calcutta,
they might know who you are?
I might end up getting bombed.
You might be. They might know who you are.
You're going to stick out anyway with the white hair, but you might have somebody tug on your shirt a little bit. Yeah.
You never know. We are big in India. We get more downloads from India than anywhere else. Yeah,
it's a great country. It's a great country. I'm obsessed with the history of India.
I'm obsessed with the food.
I was going to say the
food. I cook Indian food from every region of India.
I'm
obsessed
there you go.
with it.
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. That's our next one. We'll try to get through some more.
Okay, well, I was just there. It was a follow-up Jay asked about reincarnation. Basically, is reincarnation real? And if so, do we reincarnate as humans?
I think we've answered. I think we've answered this question about 1,000 times by now, but I'll try to be brief.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other shows that probably went into far more detail. In fact, I think there's even an episode on it somewhere. Reincarnation is not what is taught in the New Age movement or theosophy. Okay, this idea that you live in some spiritual bliss somewhere, and then you pick your life and you pick your parents and you pick your problems to learn your lessons and all this bullshit. That is just pure bullshit. That is not what Buddhism or even Hinduism teaches about it. What it is it's a bad thing. Reincarnation is to be avoided. It isn't to be embraced. It means that things aren't going right spiritually.
The wheel of samsara.
Samsara.
Yeah.
And the idea here is, yes, it is real, but not like you think, okay? So Christianity is right. It teaches you get one lifetime and one chance to use that life to attain salvation. That is absolutely correct. And you know what? Buddhists do not disagree with that intrinsically. Not intrinsically. What happens to your energy if you end up being dissipated by the fires of hell, let's say? Okay, let's say you didn't attain salvation, you end up with Gehenna, and that's it. Okay, your whatever is the energy that was you, because the laws of thermodynamics apply here, just like they do anywhere else in this universe. It is a universal law, whether you're talking spirituality or physicality. And remember, there is nowhere that here isn't. Okay, it's all one thing. So the fact is, that energy just gets recycled into the universe the way that all energy gets recycled into the universe, and then it becomes something new again. So, like, for example, I mean, you drink water, okay, and then you urinate that water out. It then goes into your toilet, into a cesspool or the sewers, and then all that urine eventually, gets reconstituted into some vat of dirty water that is reprocessed or evaporated back into what becomes rain and becomes the ocean. You know, it's not urine anymore. It's just like you're not going to be you anymore, but the energy that animated you will always be. That's the eternal soul that Father Chris was talking about. And that does indeed continue to exist. If you don't use it, it's given to something else. And that's what reincarnates, but it's not like you as an individual living out these lives. You had that one chance. Now, if you attain salvation, then the energy stays with you forever. And that's what goes on into the resurrection of the dead at the end of time and is permanent. We call that in esoteric mysticism becoming permanent. But until that happens, then the other result is that the energy eventually dissipates and then is recycled into someone else. Now, that doesn't mean that that energy doesn't retain some memory of what occurred before. And that's where past life memory comes from, or past life regression, as we've seen with Regan Forston and all that. And that's why people say, oh, I think I was a soldier who died in World War II. I mean, yeah. I mean, you're going to remember it, but it wasn't you. That wasn't you. You have the energy of perhaps a person that, and maybe just one part of them.
You got a clump of
Yep. Maybe like a little ratio, but not even the whole thing. Just the part that holds that memory. That's it. And that's not you. It's just a memory. So that's what reincarnation is. If you're interested in more, there's an actual episode on that. We can probably take maybe one or two more quick questions. What do we got?
But to say, actually, I just wanted to add something to the reincarnation. Kind of what helped me understand it, thanks to the webinar, was I kind of think of it as like when you're a kid and you watch a puppet show where you have the person having like 3 puppets spread out. And when they put their hand inside one puppet, they animate it. Seems as if it's brought to life. But then you take the hand out, the puppet essentially seems to die. And so each person is a different puppet, but it's the hand that animates the puppet that gets recycled. But this puppet here is not the same as the one in the middle.
And salvation
is not the same as the one on the right.
And salvation is turning Pinocchio into a real boy. That's what salvation is. You become a real person at that point. You're no longer a puppet. And the puppet here, okay, is whoever you choose to align yourself with. If you lie to yourself with your own ego, then, good luck, but if you let Christ animate you, that's what leads to salvation. That's what it means to take on Christ. Purge yourself of your own ego, and then that makes the puppet real, Actually, the story of Pinocchio is the story of salvation. People don't realize that, but we'll have to talk about that another day. Yeah. What's our next one? We can probably do maybe one more, if it's fast.
Do you have one?
Got 1 minute, maybe.
I've got one. Someone asked about witchcraft.
Okay.
If someone's doing witchcraft, does it cause negative energy to manifest in that space where they're conducting it?
If they're doing negative things, yeah.
I mean, we kind of answered it in the chat, but
I mean, witchcraft is a reflection of what of the practitioner. So if you're putting a lot of negative, cruel energy, evil energy into
if you don't know
something,
what you're doing,
then yeah, I mean, but you don't need to do witchcraft to do that. Just harboring evil thoughts about someone is a spell that's far more powerful than doing a witch's brew. And
being turned in on yourself and miserable and miserly and that'll do it.
That will do it every single time. So yeah, I mean, witchcraft is not the issue. It's the person that's the issue. And I'm not even talking about intent. I'm talking about nature.
right?
All right. You can intend to be a good person, but still be an asshole. That's no better than an asshole who wants to be an asshole. It's the same asshole.
No, it's worse. It's actually worse.
Is it? Yeah, it is. It is.
I've got some respect. Because
at least it's honest.
Yeah,
the other one's honest.
Yeah.
The other one's honest. Yeah. The other one's pretentious.
Well, they've actually set out a telos and worked towards it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, if you're just a bungling fool, then you're a fool.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's the end of the show. What a great way to end it too.
It was like a marathon.
I know. We love you all.
We do. We love everyone.
In India.
Yeah, in India. Thank you, India, for tuning in and being a part of our lives here. We really love and appreciate each and every one of you out there across the world. This is the end of the summer specials. We'll be back next month, September 23rd, for the next. Actually, it's the next season. It'll be the season premiere, and it will be another Open Lines, Open Topics. I don't like doing the season premiere with guests, just in case there's like technical issues that we haven't ironed out yet for the season. So I kind of like doing the first couple of shows without a guest, so I don't inconvenience them. So we'll be having a couple shows, I think just 2 episodes next season, starting in September, September 23rd, I think it is. And that's when we'll have 9 episodes for you for the fall season. We've got some great ones coming up, and please be sure to subscribe to this channel here on YouTube, Nicolayan TV, so that you can make sure that you like and put your reminders up for each of these shows, because they're going to be good ones. And I think Vestiges is in the best place it's ever been. We finally got our internet connections worked out, and I think this was a great show. I think you all can agree. And thank you all for calling in. I mean, see how much more fun it is when people actually call into the show. It's just so much better. You know, it really is. We can really take time with your question. But anyway,
good call-ins tonight.
Thank you, Father Chris. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
And thanks all moderators and everyone else. God bless you all, and I'll see you out there in the ether.
Take care.